The universe operates on principles we understand: physics, chemistry, the fundamental laws of cause and effect. Warp fields bend spacetime according to precise equations. Transporters convert matter to energy and back again following quantum mechanics. Even the Bajoran wormhole, stable and ancient, obeys rules the prophets themselves seem bound to honor. But what happens when something, or someone, defies every scanner, every database, every rational explanation for how they came to exist in your reality? Deep Space Nine's sensor logs would later show the anomaly at 0347 hours station time. A vessel, if it could be called that, tumbled through the wormhole's event horizon like a piece of shrapnel expelled from a wound. The ship was wrong. Its whole configuration matched no known species, angular where Federation vessels curved, brutal where even Klingon warships showed artistry. Scorched metal spoke of atmospheric entry's node deflector shield had softened. And its warp signature, barely registering, pulsed with a frequency that made ops instruments scream warnings about Verteron particle contamination. Chief O'Brien's hands flew across his engineering console on the operations deck. "Captain, that ship's fusion core is hemorrhaging plasma. If it breaches near the docking ring..." "Tractor beam," Captain Benjamin Sisko commanded, his voice carrying the weight of a man who'd seen too many disasters to hesitate. "Pull it to docking bay 4. Evacuate adjacent sections and get a containment field ready." Major Kira Neri studied the tactical display, her Bajoran intuition prickling. "No distress signal. No hails. Whoever's aboard either can't communicate or won't." "Life signs?" Sisko asked. Lieutenant Jadzia Dax's spots creased with concentration as she routed sensor data through multiple filters. 1. Humanoid, but the readings are. Benjamin, his cellular structure is denser than anything in our database. Bone density suggests he could survive impacts that would pulverize a human skeleton. And his neurological activity, there's something in his visual cortex that looks almost cybernetic, but it's biological. The ship shuddered into the docking bay with a screech of metal on metal. Atmosphere vented in frozen crystals. The fusion core's whine descended to silence, either stabilized or spent. On the monitors, the vessel looked even worse up close. A patchwork of repairs spanning decades, maybe longer. This was a ship that had seen the ugliest parts of space and survived through stubbornness alone. "Security team to docking bay 4. Sisko ordered. "Dr. Bashir, stand by in the infirmary. Odo, you're with me." The shapeshifter solidified from his usual column of amber liquid, his expression skeptical. "Captain, I've dealt with smugglers, pirates, and Cardassian war criminals. Something tells me this won't be a standard detention." They were right to be cautious. The airlock cycled open with a hiss of equalizing pressure. Sisko, Odo, and 4 security officers entered the docking bay, phasers drawn but lowered to non-threatening positions. The crashed ship's hatch hung open, its interior dark as a grave. Emergency lighting from the bay barely penetrated 3 meters into that blackness. "This is Captain Benjamin Sisko of Deep Space Nine," he called out, his voice echoing off bulkheads. "You're in Federation space. We mean you no harm, but I need you to identify yourself and exit the vessel." Silence. Then movement. Not footsteps. Something smoother. Predatory. A shadow detaching from shadows. The man who emerged moved like violence contained in human form. Tall, powerfully built, his body language screamed danger even in stillness. Crude goggles covered his eyes, the lenses reflecting the bay's lights in silver. His head was shaved, his skin marked with scars that told stories of blades and burns and survival at any cost. He wore clothes that had seen 100 worlds: leather, synthetic weave, armor plating at shoulders and torso. At his waist, blades. Not phasers. Not disruptors. Blades. "You want identification?" His voice was gravel and whiskey, a rumble from somewhere deep and dangerous. "You got sensors. You tell me who I am." Odo stepped forward, his security chief instincts overriding caution. Our sensors say you don't exist in any Federation database. No DNA match. No criminal record. No planet of origin. So I'll ask more specifically, what's your name, and how did you come through the wormhole? The man tilted his head slightly, as if listening to sounds no one else could hear. Then he reached up and removed the goggles with deliberate slowness. His eyes. Sisko had seen Jem'Hadar warriors bred for killing. He'd stared down Gul Dukat's megalomania. He'd faced the Borg's cold assimilation. But those eyes, silver and reflective, pupils dilated to capture every photon of light, irises that seemed to glow with their own luminescence. Those eyes belonged to a predator that had evolved in darkness and learned to make it home. Name's Riddick, the man said. And I didn't come through your wormhole. I was running from a Merc cruiser near Helion Prime when something ripped my NAV systems apart. 1 second I'm dodging plasma fire, next I'm looking at. He gestured vaguely at the bay, at the station beyond. Whatever the hell this is. Helion Prime isn't in any Federation star charts. Dax's voice crackled over Sisko's comm badge. Wouldn't expect it to be, Riddick said. He took a step forward. Every security officer raised their phaser. He stopped, hands visible but relaxed. Look, Captain. I don't know you. Don't know your Federation. Don't know this space station, prison, whatever you're running here. But I do know when I'm outnumbered and when talking's smarter than fighting. So here's how this goes. You tell me where I am, how to get home, and we part ways. No trouble. It's not that simple, Sisko said carefully. You've entered a region of space in the middle of a war. The Dominion don't care about your war. Controls half the quadrant. Sisko continued, his tone hardening. And until we verify who you are and whether you pose a threat to this station or the Federation, you're going to be our guest. Odo, escort Mr. Riddick to a holding cell. We'll sort this out after Dr. Bashir examines him. Riddick's eyes narrowed. Not big on cells. I didn't ask. For 3 seconds, the docking bay held its breath. Riddick's gaze swept across the security team, calculating angles, exit routes, threat assessment. Sisko recognized the look. He'd seen it in soldiers during the Battle of Wolf 359, that split-second decision between compliance and carnage. Then Riddick smiled. It wasn't friendly. Your station, he said. Your rules. For now. As Odo's security team surrounded the stranger and led him toward the brig, Sisko watched those silver eyes catalog every detail: guard positions, weapon types, door mechanisms. This wasn't a man being detained. This was a predator allowing himself to be caged, already planning his escape. Dax, Sisko said quietly into his comm badge. Run every analysis we have on that ship and his biology. I want to know what we're dealing with. Already on it, Benjamin. But Captain? Whatever he is, he's not from our universe. The molecular variance in his ship's hull suggests it passed through a dimensional barrier, not just the wormhole. He's not lying, he really doesn't belong here. Sisko looked at the crashed vessel, at the trail of darkness Riddick had left behind. Then God help us all, he muttered, because men who survive places we can't imagine don't play by our rules. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Trek universe, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. Live long and prosper. On Deep Space Nine, in the year 2373, as the Dominion War ground through its bloodiest phase, a ghost from another reality had arrived. He brought no technology, no secrets, no alliance, just survival instincts honed in darkness, and a very particular set of skills the Federation had no protocol for handling. The question wasn't whether Riddick would escape. It was what he'd do when he did. The holding cells on Deep Space Nine were designed by Cardassians, which meant they were designed to break spirits as efficiently as they contained bodies. Smooth walls that absorbed sound. Lighting calibrated to prevent sleep cycles from establishing rhythm. force fields humming at frequencies meant to induce low-level anxiety in most humanoid species. Odo had modified them after the Federation took control, removed the neuroprobes, the sensory deprivation protocols. But the bones of Cardassian cruelty remained. Riddick sat on the bare bench, perfectly still, and looked almost comfortable. Odo stood outside the force field, his liquid form maintaining humanoid shape through sheer discipline and irritation. In 300 years of existence, first as an outcast on Bajorans, then as Deep Space Nine's chief of security, he'd processed thousands of detainees. Smugglers who bragged. Killers who wept. Spies who negotiated. This one just sat there, those unsettling eyes watching him with the patience of something that had learned to wait in darkness for prey to make mistakes. Your ship's registration codes don't exist, Odo said, reviewing the PADD in his hands. The metals in your hull predate Federation metallurgy by, according to Chief O'Brien, at least 2 centuries, but they've been repaired with techniques we've never seen. Your fusion drive runs on a plasma mixture our replicators can't synthesize. And you... He looked up. You're not in any genetic database. Not human, though you're close. Not augment. Not clone. Dr. Bashir says your DNA has markers that suggest intentional engineering, but the methodology is completely foreign. Furyan, Riddick said quietly. Excuse me? I'm Furyan. My people, what's left of us, we're from a dead system. Long story, short version, we got wiped out when I was a kid. Necromongers came through, killed everyone who wouldn't convert. I survived. Those eyes fixed on Odo with disturbing intensity. Survival's kind of my specialty. Odo's expression didn't change, but his internal assessment shifted. Genocide survivor. That explained the scars, the weapons, the fundamental wariness. The necromongers aren't in our records either. Wouldn't expect them to be. Your Federation, you're from a different universe than mine, aren't you? That wormhole didn't just move me through space. It moved me, sideways. Riddick leaned forward slightly. Question is, can you send me back? I don't know, Odo admitted. The Bajoran wormhole is stable, but it connects our Alpha Quadrant to the Gamma Quadrant. It's not a dimensional gateway. Whatever brought you here was an accident, probably related to the Verteron surge our sensors detected. The prophets, the entities that inhabit the wormhole, they sometimes manipulate events, but they've never transported someone from another reality before. Prophets. Entities. You're telling me your wormhole's got gods in it? I'm telling you that this situation is unprecedented, and until Captain Sisko determines what to do with you, you're staying here. Odo paused. For what it's worth, if your story is true, and I believe it is, you're not a criminal in Federation law. You're a refugee from a dimensional incursion. That changes things. Riddick's smile held no warmth. Refugee. That's a new one. Usually I'm a fugitive, a murderer, or a ghost. Take your pick. Which one are you? All 3, depending on who's asking. Before Odo could respond, his comm badge chirped. Odo, this is Captain Sisko. Bring our guest to ops. We have a situation. The shapeshifter's eyes narrowed. What kind of situation? The kind where I need to know if Mr. Riddick is telling the truth about his combat capabilities. We're picking up a distress signal from a Federation transport. They're under attack by Jem'Hadar raiders. I want to assess whether our dimensional visitor is an asset or a liability before I make any decisions about his status. Riddick stood smoothly, all coiled muscle and predatory grace. Tell your captain I'm not interested in his war. Tell him yourself, Odo said, deactivating the force field. And don't try to run. This station has 3,000 inhabitants, multiple security checkpoints, and exactly 1 docking ring. You wouldn't make it 50 meters. Noted. They walked through Deep Space Nine's corridors in tense silence. Riddick's gaze catalogued everything. Structural weaknesses, crowd patterns, the way Bajoran civilians gave Starfleet officers unconscious deference. This place was a fortress pretending to be a community, all gleaming surfaces over military infrastructure. He'd seen stations like this before, out in the frontier systems where corporate interests and colonial governance met. Same lies. Different uniforms. The promenade opened before them, 2 levels of commerce and culture spiraling around a central plaza. Quark's bar dominated one corner, its Ferengi proprietor visible through transparent aluminum windows, negotiating with a Balian merchant. A Bajoran temple stood opposite, its architecture deliberate in its spiritual geometry. Shops, vendors, families, the normalcy of it scratched against Riddick's instincts like sandpaper. "You run a tight ship," he observed. "For a war zone. Deep Space Nine is more than a military outpost," Odo replied, guiding him toward a turbolift. "It's a symbol." When the Cardassians occupied Bajorans, they built this station to strip mine the system and crush resistance. Now it's a testament to what the Federation represents: cooperation, rebuilding, hope. Hope. Riddick tasted the word like poison. Hope gets you killed where I'm from. Then you're from a darker place than you've admitted. The turbolift doors opened onto Ops, Deep Space Nine's nerve center. The circular command deck rose in tiered levels, consoles alive with tactical data and sensor feeds. Captain Sisko stood at the central platform, his hands clasped behind his back, his expression carved from stone. Major Kira worked the tactical station, her fingers dancing across Cardassian-designed controls she'd learned to hate and master in equal measure. Dax monitored science feeds, her trill symbiont's centuries of experience evident in her efficient movements. Chief O'Brien looked up from engineering, took one look at Riddick, and muttered something in Irish that probably wasn't complimentary. "Mr. Riddick," Sisko said without preamble, "how much combat experience do you have? Enough to still be breathing." "Specifics." Riddick's eyes swept the ops displays, reading tactical data with unsettling speed. "Merc wars in the frontier systems. Slam city survival. That's prison, Captain, the kind where guards don't bother separating predators from prey. Bounty hunting. Cryoship security. Slam city again, different planet. Then running from mercs who wanted me for bounties I'd racked up. Lost count of the body count somewhere around triple digits. That specific enough?" Kira's hand drifted toward her phaser. "You've killed over 100 people?" "Never said they were people. Some were. Some weren't. Some were things that made your Jem'Hadar look friendly." Riddick met her glare without flinching. "You grow up where I did, you learn real fast. Kill or be killed isn't a philosophy. It's Tuesday." "Enough," Sisko said. "I'm not asking you to join Starfleet, Mr. Riddick. I'm asking if you can handle yourself in a combat situation without being a liability to my crew." "Why? You planning to deputize me?" "I'm planning to offer you a choice." Sisko gestured to the main view screen, where a Federation transport tumbled through space, its hull breached in 3 locations, Jem'Hadar attack ships circling like sharks. That transport is carrying 67 civilians, colonists relocating from a mining outpost in the demilitarized zone. The Defiant is 2 hours away responding to another crisis. By the time we get a runabout prepped and underway, those people will be dead or assimilated into Dominion labor camps. Not my problem. I'm making it your problem. You want freedom on this station? Prove you're not the killer you claim to be. Prove you can save lives instead of taking them. Sisko's voice carried command authority that had bent admirals to his will. Or stay in that cell until I figure out what to do with a dimensional anomaly who admits to being a mass murderer. Riddick was silent for 10 seconds. Somewhere in that silence, calculations happened: risk versus reward, survival versus principle, the old instinct to run versus something else. Something he'd buried a long time ago on a planet called Furia. "What's the play?" he asked finally. O'Brien pulled up schematics. "We equip a transport pod with minimal shielding, shoot you across the gap at high impulse. You board the transport, secure the civilians, and hold position until the Defiant arrives. Straight extraction, no heroics. And if the Jem'Hadar board before your ship shows up, Kira's smile was sharp as a Bajoran earring. Then we see if your triple-digit body count was exaggeration or experience. Riddick looked at each of them in turn. Sisko's unwavering command presence, Kira's warrior respect grudgingly forming, Dax's scientific curiosity, O'Brien's engineer pragmatism, Odo's security skepticism. They were asking him to risk his life for strangers. For people he'd never meet. For ideals he didn't believe in. It was the stupidest thing he'd heard in years. "Get me on that transport," he said. "But I'm taking my blades. Your phasers are pretty, but when things get close and personal, I trust steel." Sisko nodded once. "Odo, equip him. Chief, prep the transport pod. Major, maintain a weapons lock on that pod. If our guest decides to run, I want him vaporized before he clears 500 kilometers. "Understood," Kira said, her tone promising she'd enjoy pulling that trigger. As Riddick followed Odo toward the armory, Dax spoke quietly to Sisko. "Benjamin, are you sure about this? We're trusting a confessed killer with civilian lives." Sisko watched Riddick's retreating form, those strange eyes catching light from a wall panel and reflecting it back like an animal's. "No, old man," he admitted, using the affectionate term for Dax's symbiont. "I'm not sure at all." But sometimes you learn more about a man by watching what he does when he thinks no one's judging him than by anything he says in a cell. And if he runs? Then Major Kira gets target practice, and we learn he's exactly what he claims to be, a survivor who only cares about himself. But Sisko didn't believe that. Something in Riddick's eyes, beneath the predator instinct and the hard-earned cynicism, remembered what it meant to watch your people die. Genocide survivors recognized each other across species, across realities. The question wasn't whether Riddick would save those civilians. It was whether saving them would remind him of the man he'd been before the universe taught him that hope gets you killed. The transport pod was barely larger than a coffin with engines. Chief O'Brien had stripped it down to essentials: minimal life support, a single impulse thruster, ablative armor plating that might survive 30 seconds of Jem'Hadar fire if God and physics aligned. No weapons. No shields worth mentioning. Just a pressurized tube designed to shoot one man across the void fast enough that sensors might mistake it for debris. Riddick examined the interior with the clinical detachment of someone who'd survived worse. "Cozy. It'll get you there," O'Brien said, running final diagnostics. His Irish accent thickened with skepticism. "The transport shields are almost gone, but there's a breach on the port side, Section 17. I'm programming the pod to magnetically seal against the hull there. You'll have maybe 10 seconds to cut through the emergency hatch before their atmosphere vents completely." "And the Jem'Hadar?" 3 attack ships in a standard pack formation. They've already disabled the transport's engines and weapons. Right now they're holding position, probably waiting for a capture team. O'Brien pulled up tactical data on a handheld PDD. "Jem'Hadar don't take prisoners for ransom, Mr. Riddick. They take them for the Vorta to sort into labor categories or experimentation subjects. Those soldiers are genetically engineered for combat, bred in tubes, and kept loyal through addiction to a drug called Ketracel White. They don't fear death. They worship it." Riddick strapped on a utility harness Odo had provided, Starfleet issue, modified with mag-lock clips for his blades. 2 curved fighting knives, their edges worn from use and sharpening, hung at his sides. A third, smaller blade tucked into his boot. No phasers. He'd refused them, and Sisko hadn't pushed. Some men fought better with familiar tools. "Sounds like Slam City guards with better propaganda," Riddick said. "They bleed?" "Oh, they bleed." Kira's voice crackled through the pod's comm system from ops. She'd been on Bajorans during the occupation, had killed Cardassians with improvised explosives and stolen disruptors. Her respect for violence was professional. "But they don't stop unless you hit the brain stem or completely destroy the cardiovascular system. Body shots just make them angry." "Noted." Riddick settled into the pod's acceleration couch, His body language relaxed despite the suicide mission he'd volunteered for. How long until your warship shows up? The Defiant will arrive in 93 minutes. Dax replied, her trill voice calm and precise. Try not to die before then. I'd like to study your ocular modifications. The biological engineering is fascinating. I'll do my best to stay intact for science. Sisko's voice cut through, commander to soldier. Mr. Riddick, I'm transmitting the transport's internal schematics to your PDD. Civilians are concentrated in sections 9 through 12, that's the passenger decks. The bridge is section 1, likely where you'll find the crew if any survived. Your primary objective is to keep those people alive until extraction. Secondary objective is to sabotage the transport's computer core so the Dominion can't salvage intelligence. Understood? Got it. Save the sheep, burn the library. I wouldn't phrase it that way, but yes. A pause. And Riddick? The Federation doesn't abandon people. If you're still alive when the Defiant arrives, we're bringing you home too. Something flickered behind those silver eyes, surprise maybe, or the ghost of a memory from before survival became his only religion. Appreciate the sentiment, Captain. But I've been taking care of myself a long time. Don't plan to stop now. O'Brien sealed the pod hatch with a pneumatic hiss. Through the small viewport, Riddick watched the chief back away, muttering something about crazy dimensional refugees and Starfleet's habit of adopting strays. Then the docking clamps released, magnetic field shoved the pod into open space, and impulse engines ignited with a force that would have crushed ribs if the inertial dampeners weren't working overtime. The pod shot across the gap between Deep Space Nine and the dying transport like a bullet fired by gods. Stars wheeled past the viewport. The Bajoran sun hung distant and indifferent. And ahead, limned against the black, the Federation transport tumbled in a slow death spiral, atmosphere venting in crystalline clouds, hull breaches glowing orange from internal fires. The three Jem'Hadar attack ships maintained formation. Predators satisfied their prey was crippled, waiting for the Vorta's orders to board. Riddick's eyes adjusted instantly to the darkness beyond the pod's minimal lighting, pupils dilating to capture every photon. He'd lived in darkness so long that light was the anomaly. Out here, in the void between stars, he was home. The pod's computer chirped proximity warnings. 30 seconds to impact. The magnetic grapples deployed, extending like fingers reaching for a handhold. 20 seconds. The transport's damaged hull filled the viewport, scorch marks and twisted metal testament to Jem'Hadar efficiency. 10 seconds. Impact. The magnetic seal caught with a vibration Riddick felt in his teeth. Atmosphere equalized with a shriek of pressure differentials. He triggered the emergency hatch cutter, a plasma torch built into the pod's nose, and watched it burn through reinforced uranium in a shower of sparks that would have blinded normal eyes. His just adjusted, compensated, saw through the glare to the darkness beyond. The hatch fell inward with a clang that echoed through dead corridors. Riddick pulled himself through the breach into Section 17, and the smell hit him immediately. Burnt insulation, vented coolant, and underneath it all, the copper tang of blood. Emergency lighting flickered in amber pulses, casting shadows that danced across walls designed for civilian comfort, and now shredded by weapons fire. A body lay crumpled against a bulkhead, human, male, Starfleet engineering uniform scorched black across the chest. Dead maybe 10 minutes, eyes still open in surprise. Riddick knelt, closed the man's eyes with 2 fingers. Old habit. Respect for the dead, even strangers dead, was something Furia had taught him before the necromongers erased his world. He pulled the PADD from his harness, checking schematics. Sections 9 through 12 were forward, 3 decks up. The bridge was 5 decks above that. He oriented himself, mapping escape routes and choke points with the automatic precision of someone who'd survived ambushes by being 3 steps ahead of the hunters. The ship groaned, structural integrity failing by degrees. Somewhere in the distance, something exploded, small, maybe a power conduit overloading. The emergency lighting died for 3 seconds, plunging the corridor into absolute darkness. Riddick smiled. In the dark, he was apex. His eyes shifted, irises catching ambient radiation invisible to baseline humans, painting the world in silver and shadow. He moved forward, silent despite his size, each footfall placed with predatory care. Blades stayed sheathed, no need yet, and announcing his presence would waste the advantage. He found the first survivors in Section 11. They'd barricaded themselves in what the schematics labeled a mess hall. Tables welded across the doorway, emergency force fields flickering at half strength. 37 people huddled in the darkness, their faces illuminated by the glow of emergency ration heaters and personal pads. Humans, Balians, a family of Andorians with their antennae drooping in fear. Children clung to parents. An elderly Vulcan woman maintained meditative calm while her hands trembled. Riddick stood in the corridor outside, watching through a gap in the barricade. They hadn't noticed him yet, too focused on their own terror, on the sounds of Jem'Hadar transporters cycling somewhere in the ship's upper decks. He could leave them. Could head for the bridge, sabotage the computer, take the most direct route back to the pod. These people were strangers. Their survival didn't increase his odds. But he didn't move. A child, human maybe 6 years old, looked up and saw him through the gap. Her eyes went wide. She opened her mouth to scream. Riddick raised one finger to his lips in the universal gesture for silence. His eyes, reflecting the dim light like an animal's, held hers. She closed her mouth, nodded once with the strange trust only children had before the universe taught them better. He pulled a plasma cutter from his harness. O'Brien had included it for the bridge sabotage, and began cutting through the barricade's welds. The high-pitched whine brought immediate reaction. A Balian man grabbed an improvised weapon, something cobbled together from a food synthesizer and a power cell. 2 humans in civilian clothes moved to defensive positions. The barricade section fell away with a metallic clang. Riddick stepped through, hands visible, non-threatening despite the blades at his waist. Federation sent me. Transport ships coming, but we've got maybe 80 minutes before the Jem'Hadar decide to board and start sorting you into work details. So here's how this goes. You follow me, stay quiet, and maybe we all live through this. Questions? Who are you? The Balian demanded, his weapon shaking but aimed center mass. You're not Starfleet. No. I'm worse. But right now, I'm what you've got. Riddick's eyes swept the crowd, cataloging injuries, assessing who could move fast and who need help. The Jem'Hadar will start with the bridge, then work down. We've got time to move, not to debate. So decide, trust me or wait here for soldiers bred to kill who don't take prisoners. The Vulcan woman stood, her logic overriding fear. Your ocular modifications suggest extensive genetic engineering. Your combat stance and weapons indicate extensive military or paramilitary experience. Captain Sisko would not send an amateur on this mission. Therefore, despite your unconventional presentation, you represent our optimal survival probability. Riddick almost smiled. I like her. Everyone else on board? The Balian lowered his weapon slowly. There were others on the passenger decks, sections 9 and 10. Maybe 20 people. But after the first attack, the bulkhead sealed. We haven't heard from them. Then we get them. Stick together, stay in the dark where possible, and if shooting starts, you hit the deck and let me work. Riddick pulled one blade, tested its balance. One more thing, I see pretty good in the dark. Better than you. So when the lights go out, don't panic. Just follow my voice. As if summoned by prophecy, the emergency lighting died completely. 37 civilians gasped in unison, their universe collapsing to blindness and the sound of their own hammering hearts. In the absolute darkness, Riddick's eyes ignited like stars. Stay close, he said, his voice gravel and certainty. And try to keep up. He moved into the corridor, and after a moment's hesitation, they followed. Following a killer from another reality because sometimes survival meant trusting the monster who promised to fight the worst monsters waiting in the dark. Above them, On the transport's bridge, Jem'Hadar soldiers materialized in columns of light, their Cardassian blades already drawn. The hunt had begun. The Jem'Hadar moved through the transport's upper decks with the efficiency of apex predators bred in laboratories and baptized in combat. 6 soldiers, gray-skinned and reptilian, their bodies encased in armor that seemed grown rather than manufactured. They carried Cardassian polearms, brutal combination blade and bludgeon weapons designed for close-quarters butchery, and Polaron disruptors holstered at their hips. Their leader, a first with facial ridges denoting 15 years of survival in a species where most died within 10, gestured orders in the economical hand signals of soldiers who knew that noise was weakness. They cleared the bridge in 30 seconds. 2 crew members found hiding in the captain's ready room, executed without ceremony. The computer core, however, remained intact, its data ripe for Vorta analysis. The first keyed his communicator, his voice a growl that held no inflection, no humanity. The bridge is secured. Beginning sweep of passenger decks. Resistance minimal. Acknowledged, replied the Vorta's silken voice from the attack ship. Acquire civilians for labor assessment. The Founders require workers for the Vandros for the lithium mines. Kill anyone who resists, but preserve breeding stock and skilled technicians. Understood. The first closed the channel and turned to his squad. Standard sweep pattern. Level by level. Anyone who runs, shoot them. The Founders demand efficiency. They descended into the transport's wounded guts, their enhanced senses tracking heat signatures, their training overriding anything resembling mercy. To be Jem'Hadar was to serve. To serve was to kill. And to kill for the Founders was the only honor the universe offered. 3 decks below, Riddick heard them coming. His ears, sharpened by years of listening for predators in Slam's city darkness and alien wilderness, caught the whisper of armored boots on decking. Standard military rhythm, disciplined, confident, unhurried. 6 sets of footfalls, maybe 7. Professional soldiers, not panicked civilians or opportunistic raiders. He raised a hand, stopping the refugee column behind him. Company's coming, he whispered. How many decks between us and them? The Vulcan woman, Clara, she'd introduced herself, consulted a PDD with Vulcan composure despite the sweat on her brow. If they originated from the bridge and are conducting a systematic sweep, they would logically proceed deck by deck. Current distance, 2 decks, descending. Estimated contact in 4.3 minutes. Can we avoid them? The Balian Vec asked, his blue skin pale with fear. Riddick studied the schematics. The transport's layout was standard Federation, central corridor spine with crew quarters and passenger sections branching off like ribs. Multiple routes, but all funneled eventually to the same destinations. Not if we want to reach sections 9 and 10. We'd have to backtrack, circle around, and that puts us in the open when their reinforcements show up. Plus, it wastes time we don't have. So what do we do? A human woman, maybe 40, holding her daughter, the same child who'd spotted Riddick earlier, close to her chest. You can't expect us to fight them. I don't. Riddick's eyes scanned the corridor, tactical assessment happening behind silver irises. You're going to hide. I'm going to reduce the number of problems between us and those other survivors. You're going to fight 6 Jem'Hadar soldiers alone? Clara's eyebrow arched in the universal Vulcan expression of skepticism. Statistically, that represents a survival probability of less than. Don't care about your statistics. Riddick pointed to a cargo bay door 20 meters ahead. That room's got environmental controls, heavy crates for cover, and only one entrance. You seal yourselves in, keep quiet, and wait. If I'm not back in 15 minutes, you find another route and keep moving toward the docking ring where the Federation ship will dock. And if you die? Vec demanded. Then you hide better and hope their captain's got a conscience. Riddick moved toward the intersection where the corridor branched, his blades now in his hands, their edges catching emergency lighting like promises. But I don't plan on dying today. Got too many questions about this universe that need answering. The civilians retreated into the cargo bay with the hushed desperation of prey-seeking burrows. The doors sealed with a magnetic hum. Riddick stood alone in the corridor, listening to the Jem'Hadar's descent grow louder, 3 decks away now, maybe less. He killed the emergency lighting with a junction box override, plunging the corridor into absolute darkness. Then he waited. Patience was a Furyan virtue. On a world where predators hunted by heat and motion, stillness became religion. Riddick had learned to slow his breathing, lower his heart rate, become a shadow that shadows overlooked. The darkness wrapped around him like an old friend, and his eyes, those surgically enhanced, genetically optimized eyes, drank in the infrared spectrum invisible to most species. The Jem'Hadar entered the corridor 2 minutes later. They moved in a standard formation. 2-point soldiers, 3 in the middle, 1 rear guard. Professional. Disciplined. Their Polaron disruptors emitted faint energy signatures that Riddick's eyes registered as green-tinged heat. They wore helmets with integrated sensors, but those sensors were calibrated for Federation technology, for weapons and communicators and the electromagnetic noise of civilized space. They weren't calibrated for a man standing perfectly still in the dark, blades naked in his hands, heart rate barely elevated despite the violence about to unfold. The first, Riddick identified him by the confident stride and central position, raised a fist. The squad halted. Thermal scans detect residual heat signatures. Humanoids recently present. Spread out. Room by room. They separated. Riddick moved. The rear guard never saw him. One moment the corridor was empty. The next, Riddick materialized from darkness like a nightmare given flesh, his blade driving up under the Jem'Hadar's jaw and into the brain stem with surgical precision. The soldier's nervous system short-circuited before he could trigger his weapon. Riddick caught the body, lowered it silently, took the Polaron disruptor, and melted back into shadow. 5 left. The nearest soldier turned at a sound, fabric shifting maybe, or the whisper of blade leaving sheath. His enhanced Jem'Hadar vision pierced the darkness better than human eyes, found Riddick's silhouette 10 meters away. He raised his disruptor, mouth opening to shout warning. Riddick threw the blade. It spun twice, crossing the distance in a heartbeat, and buried itself in the soldier's throat. The Jem'Hadar staggered, choking on blood in surprise, firing his disruptor wildly. Green energy bolts scarred the walls, vaporized deck plating, and announced to everyone in a 3-corridor radius that contact had been made. Enemy contact! The first bellowed, his voice carrying command authority and zero fear. Converge on Section 14. Kill on sight! 4 soldiers rushed toward the sound of their dying comrade. Riddick was already moving, using the cargo containers and support columns for cover, his body language fluid and economical. He'd fought in slammed cities where shivs and fists decided who ate and who became food. He'd survived merc teams equipped with military-grade hardware. Jem'Hadar were dangerous, but they fought like soldiers, predictable, by doctrine, relying on superior training and equipment. Riddick fought like something that had evolved past doctrine into pure survival instinct. He came up behind the second soldier from a ventilation shaft, too small for Jem'Hadar bulk but perfect for a man who'd spent years escaping impossible prisons. The blade took the soldier between armor plates, found the kidneys twisted. The Jem'Hadar convulsed, tried to turn, met Riddick's fist driving into his temple with Furyan-enhanced strength that cracked bone. The body dropped. 3 left. He's using melee combat! One soldier shouted, panic creeping into his genetically conditioned discipline. Disruptors ineffective at close range. The first voice cut through like a Cardassian blade. Maintain formation! Back-to-back defense! He can't engage all of us simultaneously. They formed a triangle, weapons out, scanning the darkness with sensors that showed heat signatures, movement, but couldn't quite track the man who'd learned to become absence itself. Riddick watched from 15 meters away, crouched behind a support column, his breathing controlled, his mind calculating angles and timing. 3-on-1 odds. Trained soldiers with energy weapons in a defensive formation. The smart play was to wait them out, let them separate during their search, pick them off individually. But time was bleeding away, and somewhere on this transport, 20 more civilians waited in sealed sections, their air running out or their fear building to panic. So Riddick made the stupid play. He triggered the pull-around disruptor he'd taken from the first kill, firing 3 shots into the ceiling above the Jem'Hadar. Deck plating exploded, raining molten metal and sparks. The soldiers flinched, just a microsecond, but enough, and Riddick charged. He hit the nearest soldier like a battering ram wrapped in blades and bad intentions. The Jem'Hadar's disruptor fired, missed, the energy bolt scorching Riddick's shoulder and filling the air with the smell of burned leather and flesh. Riddick didn't slow. His blade found the gap between helmet and chest armor, severed the carotid artery, and the soldier's genetic conditioning meant nothing against arterial spray and blood loss. 2 left. The first spun, Cardassian sweeping in a professional arc designed to bisect opponents. Riddick rolled under the blade, came up inside the weapon's reach, drove his knee into the first's midsection with force that would have crippled a human. The Jem'Hadar grunted. Pain existed for them, even if fear didn't, and brought the Cardassian's blunt end down toward Riddick's skull. Riddick caught the haft, twisted, used the first's own momentum to throw him into the last soldier. They collided in a tangle of armor and fury. Riddick didn't give them time to recover. He kicked the first helmet, cracking the visor, then drove his blade into the last soldier's eye socket with the clinical efficiency of a man who'd killed too many times to feel anything but tired. The first rolled to his feet, bleeding from a dozen cuts, his Cardassian lost in the chaos. His eyes, black and reptilian and absolutely cold, fixed on Riddick with something approaching respect. You fight well, human. But you cannot win. More soldiers come. The Dominion is infinite. You are alone. Riddick wiped blood from his blade on the dead soldier's armor. Been alone before. Still breathing. The first smiled, a terrible expression on a face designed for war. Then die knowing you fought honorably, even if you die a slave's death. He lunged, massive fists swinging with Jem'Hadar strength that could crush bones. Riddick sidestepped the first blow, deflected the second, and realized with cold clarity that this one was better than the others. Older. Experienced. The kind of soldier who'd survived 15 years because he learned from every battle. They traded blows in the darkness, Furyan enhanced reflexes against Jem'Hadar genetic engineering, blades against armored fists, silence against growled Dominion prayers. The first landed a hit that cracked Riddick's ribs. Riddick returned it with a blade across the first's thigh that severed muscle. They circled, bleeding, either willing to yield. Why do you fight for them? The first demanded, gesturing at the cargo bay where the civilians hid. They are weak. Prey. Not worth dying for. Riddick paused, considering the question. Why was he fighting? These people meant nothing to him. He owed them nothing. He could have stayed in that cell on Deep Space Nine, let the Federation sort out his dimensional displacement, avoided this entire mess. But then he remembered a child's face in the barricade gap. Remembered 37 people following him into darkness because they had no other choice. Remembered what it felt like when necromongers came to Furia and no one fought for the weak, for the prey, for the people who just wanted to live. Maybe I'm tired of being the monster, Riddick said quietly. Or maybe I just hate bullies with better weapons. He attacked before the first could respond, a flurry of strikes that drove the Jem'Hadar back, toward the corridor's edge where a hull breach glowed with vacuum beyond. The first heel caught on debris. He stumbled. Riddick's blade found his throat. The first fell, eyes still open, lips moving in a prayer to founders who wouldn't remember his name. Victory is life, he whispered. Not today, Riddick replied, and closed the soldier's eyes. 6 Jem'Hadar lay dead in the corridor. Riddick stood among them, breathing hard, ribs screaming, shoulder burned, blades dripping. The cargo bay door opened. 37 faces stared at him. At the carnage, at the man who'd survived impossible odds, at the killer who'd chosen to save them. The little girl spoke first. "You came back. Said I would." Riddick sheathed his blades. "Now let's go get the others before reinforcements show up. Clock's ticking." They followed him deeper into the transport, into darkness and uncertainty, following a ghost from another reality who'd remembered, just for one day, what it meant to fight for something other than survival. Above, on the Jem'Hadar attack ships, Vorta officers noted the loss of contact with their boarding party and began preparing the next wave. The war had come to the civilian transport, and Riddick was just getting started. The bridge of the lead Jem'Hadar attack ship hummed with the cold efficiency of Dominion military doctrine. Vorta Field Supervisor Keevan stood at the tactical console, his pale hands clasped behind his back, his genetically engineered features arranged in an expression of mild irritation. The loss of 6 soldiers should have troubled him more, but Vorta were cloned, disposable and replaceable, like the Jem'Hadar they commanded. What troubled him was the inefficiency. "Replay the last transmission," he ordered. The bridge officer complied. Audio crackled through the speakers, disruptor fire, shouting, the wet sounds of close-quarters combat, and then silence punctuated by a single voice speaking words in a language the universal translator struggled to parse. "Not today!" "Analysis?" Keevan asked. A Jem'Hadar second, younger than the first who died, eager to prove himself, studied the tactical readout. "Single combatant." Biometric scans from the transport detected one humanoid signature inconsistent with Federation profiles. Thermal imaging suggests enhanced metabolic function and superior low-light vision. Combat efficiency exceeds Starfleet security training parameters. Starfleet doesn't send one man to defend a civilian transport. Keevan mused, his tone clinical. Which means this individual is either uniquely capable or uniquely foolish. Either way, he's cost us 6 soldiers and delayed our acquisition schedule. He turned to the second. Dispatch 2 squads. 15 soldiers. Kill the defender, secure the civilians, and prepare the transport for towing. The founders dislike waste, and those colonists represent 300 workdays of labor value. It will be done. The second salute was precise, religious in its devotion. Victory is life. Indeed. And efficiency is victory. Keevan watched the second depart, then activated a secure channel to the Vorta command ship 3 light-years away. "This is Keevan. I'm reporting an anomaly on the civilian transport. Recommend investigation by the Founders Intelligence Division. The Defender's combat profile doesn't match any known species in the Alpha Quadrant database." The response came after a moment's delay, filtered through subspace and bureaucracy. "Acknowledged. Secure the anomaly if possible. The Founders value new genetic material for Jem'Hadar enhancement programs." Keevan smiled. "Capture a unique warrior, deliver him to the Founders, earn recognition in a hierarchy where clones struggled for individual distinction." "With pleasure." Deep in the transport's bowels, Riddick moved through Section 10 like a ghost cataloging the living and the dead. The bulkhead seals had held here emergency protocols activated by the first Jem'Hadar attack, trapping 23 people in a passenger compartment designed for comfort, not siege. They'd used furniture to barricade the door, rationed emergency supplies, and waited with the terrible patience of prey hoping predators would lose interest. When Riddick cut through the bulkhead seal with his appropriated plasma torch, they greeted him with improvised weapons and desperate courage. "Easy," he said, hands visible, blade sheathed. "Federation sent me. Got 37 people in a cargo bay 2 sections over, and we're all leaving together. So pack light, move fast, and save the questions for when we're not sitting in a metal coffin with Jem'Hadar incoming." A human man, late 50s, colonist clothing stained with hydraulic fluid and fierce sweat, lowered a length of pipe he'd been brandishing like a club. The crew said help was coming, but they also said the distress signal might not reach anyone in time. "You're alone?" "For now. Starfleet warships en route, but we've got maybe 60 minutes before the next wave of Jem'Hadar boards." They lost 6 soldiers and they're going to be pissed about it. The little girl who'd spotted him first pushed through the crowd, holding something in her small hands, an emergency beacon, the kind Federation civilians carried for rescue scenarios. Take this. So they can find you after. Riddick met her eyes. For a moment, the killer's mask slipped, revealing something underneath. Grief, maybe, or the memory of another child on another world who hadn't survived. What's your name? Sarah. Okay, Sarah. I'll take your beacon. And when this is over, when you're safe on that big Federation starship, you tell the captain something for me. Tell him Riddick kept his word. He stood, the beacon clipped to his harness. Now get inside and stay quiet. The 60 refugees crowded into the maintenance hub, sealing the doors behind them. Riddick stood alone in the corridor, listening to the transporter harmonics resolve into the thud of armored boots. 15 Jem'Hadar, the second had said. 15 genetically engineered killers against one-dimensional refugee with blades and bad attitude. He smiled in the darkness. Then he started running, not away from the Jem'Hadar, but toward them, his boots hammering against deck plating in a rhythm designed to draw attention, to make them think the civilians were fleeing in panic. He fired the Polaron disruptor at random intervals, scarring walls and venting atmosphere, leaving a trail any competent tracker would follow. The Jem'Hadar took the bait. They converged on his position in 2 squads, standard military doctrine, 1 to pursue, 1 to flank. Riddick led them on a chase through the transport's guts, through crew quarters and engineering spaces, always staying just ahead of their sensors, always leaving enough evidence to keep them committed. He triggered false heat signatures with overloaded power cells. Sealed bulkheads behind him to slow pursuit. Vented compartments to create confusion. And when he'd led them far enough from the refugees, deep into the transport's engineering section where coolant pipes and reactor shielding created a maze of metal and shadow, he stopped running. The Jem'Hadar second entered the engine room with his squad in tactical formation, weapons ready, sensors sweeping for the prey that had led them on this chase. The room was dark, emergency power only, casting long shadows from the dormant warp core and plasma conduits. Perfect ambush terrain for someone who could see in the dark. Spread out, the second ordered. He's here. I can smell his fear. You smell wrong. Riddick's voice echoed from everywhere and nowhere, distorted by the room's acoustics. I stopped being afraid a long time ago. Now I'm just pissed off that you people interrupted my day. Disruptor fire lit the darkness, wild shots seeking a target that moved like smoke. Riddick was already behind them, blade in hand, striking from shadow. One Jem'Hadar fell, throat opened. Another turned too slow, took the blade in the spine. Riddick dropped the Polaron disruptor he'd been using as distraction and pulled his second blade, both hands armed now, his body moving with Furyan combat forms learned in childhood and perfected through decades of survival. The second finally spotted him, a silhouette against reactor glow, blades reflecting emergency lighting. There! Concentrate fire! Polaron bolts converged on Riddick's position. He dove behind a coolant exchanger, felt the heat of near misses vaporize the air where he'd stood. The Jem'Hadar advanced, professional and methodical, closing the net. 13 left now. Too many for straight combat. So Riddick changed the rules. He'd been studying the engine room while leading them here, cataloging structural weaknesses and catastrophic failure points. The warp core was offline but still contained residual antimatter in magnetic bottles. The plasma conduits ran throughout the room, pressurized and volatile. And the coolant system, designed to prevent reactor meltdown, was one well-placed blade strike away from flooding the room with sub-zero liquid that would freeze Jem'Hadar flesh as easily as human. He cut the primary coolant line. Liquid nitrogen erupted like a geyser, instantly dropping the temperature 40 degrees. Jem'Hadar stumbled, their armor cracking in the thermal shock, their enhanced physiology struggling against cold that turned breath to ice crystals. Riddick moved through the chaos, blades finding throats and hearts, his Furyan metabolism compensating for the cold better than their genetic engineering. The second roared in fury, firing blindly, hitting his own soldiers as often as empty air. "He's just one man! Kill him!" "I'm really tired," Riddick said, appearing behind the second like a nightmare, "of people underestimating me." His blade took the second in the kidney. The Jem'Hadar spun, Cardassian whistling through frozen air. Riddick ducked, came up inside the weapon's arc, drove his second blade through the gap in chest armor where Jem'Hadar biology placed their primary heart. The second fell, eyes wide with shock that a lone humanoid could defeat 15 of the Founder's finest. "Victory is life," Riddick quoted, his breath misting. "Guess you lost." He stood among the bodies, bleeding from a dozen cuts, ribs screaming, shoulder burned, hypothermia setting in from the coolant exposure. But alive. Still breathing. His comrade, Odo had given him one before the mission, chirped. "Riddick, this is the Defiant." Commander Worf's Klingon growl carried both respect and urgency. "We are docking at the transport now. What is your status?" Riddick looked at the carnage around him. "Status is I really need a drink and a medic. Refugees are sealed in the maintenance hub, section 14. Get them out first." "Understood." "Well fought, Mr. Riddick." Coming from a Klingon, that was the highest compliment possible. Riddick limped toward the docking ring, following the path he memorized, his body protesting every step. Behind him, the Jem'Hadar attack ships detected the Defiant's arrival and retreated, Vorta efficiency overriding revenge, calculating that 3 ships couldn't defeat a Federation warship without acceptable losses. When Riddick reached the docking ring, the refugees were already boarding. 60 frightened people ushered by Starfleet security, medics treating injuries, someone wrapping a thermal blanket around the pregnant Andorian woman. They saw him emerge from the darkness, covered in blood and frost, blade still in hand, and something passed through the crowd, not quite gratitude, not quite fear, but recognition. They'd survived because a killer chose to save them. Sarah broke from her mother's grip, ran to Riddick, and hugged his leg with the fierce certainty of childhood. "You came back. Again." He looked down at her, this small human who trusted a monster in the dark, and something cracked in the armor he built around whatever passed for his soul. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I keep my word." Captain Sisko stood at the docking port, flanked by Worf and Dr. Bashir. His expression was unreadable, but when he spoke, his voice carried weight. 21 Jem'Hadar dead. 60 civilians saved. Against orders, you engaged in combat you had no obligation to win. He paused. And you won anyway. The Federation owes you a debt, Mr. Riddick. Don't want a debt. Want a ship and a way home. We'll work on the ship, Sisko said. As for home, that's more complicated. But for now, you're welcome on Deep Space Nine. Not as a prisoner. As someone who's earned the right to walk free. Riddick nodded, too tired to argue, too hurt to care about politics. As Bashir led him toward the Defiant's medical bay, he looked back once at the damaged transport, at the darkness where he'd fought and killed, and somehow remembered what it meant to be more than just a survivor. In the war between idealism and brutality, between the Federation's hope and the Dominion's certainty, he'd chosen a side. He just wasn't sure yet what that choice would cost him. Deep Space Nine's infirmary operated with the controlled chaos of a medical facility serving a frontier station during wartime. Biobed sensors hummed their diagnostic symphonies, synthesizers fabricated medications with molecular precision, and Dr. Julian Bashir moved between patients with the confidence of a man whose genetically enhanced intellect processed trauma protocols faster than most people read menus. Riddick sat on a biobed in the corner, stripped to the waist, while Bashir ran a dermal regenerator over the Polaron burns scoring his shoulder. The device knitted flesh with microscopic force fields, rebuilding skin cells layer by layer, erasing the evidence of violence that Riddick's body wore like a second skin. Fascinating, Bashir muttered, studying his medical tricorder. Your cellular regeneration is already accelerating the healing process. I've never seen metabolic efficiency like this outside of Klingon physiology, and even they can't match your recovery rate. The genetic engineering your people underwent, Furians, you said, it's remarkably sophisticated. Whoever designed it understood biology at a level that rivals even our most advanced augmentation programs. Wasn't designed, Riddick said, his voice tired. Evolved. Furia wasn't a kind world. Things that hunted in the dark, things that made your Jem'Hadar look like children playing soldier. We adapted or died. Most died. And yet you survived. Bashir moved to examine Riddick's ribs, 3 cracked, 1 fractured, all healing faster than human baseline despite the damage. Your ocular modifications alone represent surgical precision beyond Federation capabilities. The tapetum lucidum enhancement, the expanded rod cell density, the neural pathway reconfiguration. Whoever performed this surgery was an artist. Surgeon on Butcher Bay Slam. Paid him with favors and promises. He gave me shine job eyes so I could see the guards coming in the dark. Riddick's silver gaze fixed on Bashir with uncomfortable intensity. Wasn't art, document was survival. Everything I am, everything I've done, it's all just trying to stay breathing one more day. Bashir paused, his enhanced mind processing not just the words but the weight behind them. He'd struggled with his own augmentation, illegal genetic engineering performed by parents who wanted a better life for their son, consequences that nearly destroyed his Starfleet career. He understood what it meant to be shaped by forces beyond your control, to be more than human and less than free. I know something about being designed, Bashir said quietly. About having your biology dictated by others' choices. It's different, Riddick interrupted. You got parents who loved you enough to risk everything. I got a dead planet and a heritage that made me a target for every merc, bounty hunter, and government agency looking to weaponize something they don't understand. He tested his ribs, felt the ache receding. So save the empathy, document. I didn't ask for your understanding. Just patch me up and point me toward whoever can explain how I get home. Before Bashir could respond, the infirmary doors hissed open. Quark entered with the distinctive waddle of a Ferengi who'd spotted profit potential, his lobes practically quivering with commercial interest. Behind him, looking significantly less enthusiastic, Security Chief Odo solidified from his liquid form with an expression that suggested he'd rather be anywhere else. Ah, the hero of the hour! Quark announced, spreading his arms in theatrical welcome. Mr. Riddick, I've been hearing the most extraordinary stories. 21 Jem'Hadar killed, 60 civilians saved, all while operating in complete darkness like some kind of supernatural predator. Absolutely thrilling! I've already had 3 requests for holocid programs based on your exploits. Not interested, Riddick said flatly. Of course not, of course not. But perhaps you'd be interested in more immediate opportunities? Quark produced a PADD from his garish jacket. You see, a man with your particular skills, combat expertise, survival instincts, ability to operate in hostile environments, that man could be very valuable to certain business interests. I represent clients who occasionally require discreet security services. High-risk contracts in the Badlands, escort missions through Cardassian space, retrieval operations where Starfleet's Precious Prime Directive prevents official involvement. Odo's expression curdled. Quark, you're soliciting a man who just got out of a firefight to work as a mercenary? Have you no shame? Shame doesn't pay for bar renovations, Odo. Besides, I'm offering honest work to someone clearly qualified. Unlike some security chiefs who keep people locked in cells without trial. He was detained for investigation during a dimensional incursion. Enough. Riddick interrupted, his voice carrying the weight of someone tired of being talked about like property. Quark, I appreciate the entrepreneurial spirit, but I'm not looking for work. I'm looking for a way home. And you? He fixed Odo with those unsettling eyes. I know you don't trust me. Smart. I wouldn't trust me either. But I kept my word on that transport. Saved your civilians. Killed your enemies. So maybe we can skip the part where you follow me around the station waiting for me to slip up. Odo's liquid features shifted, almost imperceptibly. Captain Sisko has granted you freedom of movement on the station. I disagree with that decision, but I follow orders. However, understand this: Deep Space Nine is a community. Families live here. Children play in the corridors. If you threaten that, then you'll do what security chiefs do. Riddick finished. Noted. But I've spent enough time in cages. If your captain says I can walk, I'm walking. Bashir cleared his throat diplomatically. Actually, I'd prefer you rest for at least 12 hours. Those rib fractures are healing rapidly, but Furyan physiology or not, you need time to recover fully. I'm releasing you to quarters, not to prowl the station looking for trouble. Don't prowl. I hunt. There's a difference. Semantics that concern me greatly, Odo muttered. As if summoned by the rising tension, Captain Sisko entered the infirmary with Major Kira at his side. Both wore the expressions of officers who'd been debriefing 60 traumatized refugees and assembling after-action reports that would climb the chain of command to Starfleet intelligence. Mr. Riddick, Sisko said, nodding acknowledgement. Dr. Bashir, how's our patient? Recovering faster than I'd expect from anyone without Klingon ancestry. He'll be fully healed within 48 hours at current regeneration rates. Good. Because we need to talk about what happens next. Sisko gestured toward a private consultation room. Quark Odo, dismissed. This conversation is need to know. Quark's protest died under Sisko's glare. The Ferengi departed with Odo in reluctant attendance, leaving Riddick alone with Sisko, Kira, and Bashir. The consultation room was small, designed for private medical discussions, its walls soundproofed against station noise. Sisko sat across from Riddick, his hands folded on the table, his captain's bearing evident even in casual posture. You did good work on that transport, Sisko began. Starfleet Command has already sent commendations. 60 lives saved against overwhelming odds. But I need to know, was that a one-time thing, or are you willing to help us again? Depends what you're asking. Information. Tactical assessment. Perspective. Sisko pulled up a star chart on the room's display, the Alpha and Gamma quadrants, with Dominion territory marked in hostile red, Federation blue, and neutral zones in gray. The Dominion war is escalating. We're fighting an enemy that breeds soldiers in tubes, controls them through drug addiction, and sends them to die without hesitation. Traditional Federation tactics, diplomacy, negotiation, appeals to common ground, they don't work against an enemy that views us as obstacles to their founders' divinely ordained conquest. And you think I can help with that? Riddick studied the map with professional interest. I'm not a strategist, Captain. I'm a survivor. I don't plan wars. I win fights. Exactly. Kira interjected, her Bajoran intensity focused like a blade. The Federation fights honorably. We follow rules, conventions, the expectation that our enemies will do the same. The Cardassians taught me during the occupation that sometimes honor gets you killed. Sometimes you need people who understand how predators think. Riddick's eyes narrowed. You want me to teach your people how to fight dirty? I want you to teach us how to survive, Sisko corrected. The Jem'Hadar you killed, you didn't just outfight them. You outthought them. Used environment darkness, their own doctrine against them. That's not standard Starfleet training. That's something else. That's Slam City education. Prison rules. Merc tactics. Riddick leaned back, considering. You're asking me to corrupt your shiny Federation ideals with the kind of thinking that kept me alive in places where civilization was a joke and violence was currency. I'm asking, Sisko said carefully, for you to share knowledge that might save lives. We don't abandon our principles, Mr. Riddick. But we adapt. Learn. Evolve. The Dominion War is testing everything the Federation stands for. If we can't find ways to fight smarter, we'll lose not just battles, but the future we're trying to protect. Silence settled in the consultation room. Outside, Deep Space Nine continued its daily rhythm, commerce on the promenade, prayers in the Bajoran temple, families living their lives while war ground through distant systems. Riddick had spent his entire existence on the edges of civilization, watching societies promise protection they couldn't deliver, watching the strong devour the weak while governments pretended laws mattered. But he'd also seen 60 people trust him enough to follow him into darkness. Seen a little girl believe he'd come back. Seen a Starfleet captain offer freedom instead of a cell. "I'll consult," he said finally. "Share what I know about fighting against superior numbers, using terrain, exploiting enemy psychology. But I'm not joining your military. Not wearing your uniform. And the moment you try to make me into something I'm not, a hero, a symbol, a poster boy for your war effort, I'm gone." "Clear?" "Crystal," Sisko agreed. "We'll arrange quarters for you in the habitat ring. You'll have station access, within reason, and Odo will brief you on security protocols. In exchange, you work with our tactical teams. Share your expertise. And when we need someone who can operate in environments where Starfleet rules become liabilities, you're available. Sounds like mercenary work with better PR. Sounds like mutual benefit." Sisko countered. "You help us fight smarter. We help you find a way home. Our science team, Lieutenant Dax, is brilliant, by the way. They're already analyzing the dimensional variance in your ship's hull. If anyone can figure out how to reverse your displacement, it's her." Riddick considered the offer. Home. Helion Prime. The frontier systems he knew, the darkness he understood. Getting back meant finding technology that could punch through dimensional barriers, meant working with people he didn't trust, meant staying in a universe that operated on rules foreign to everything he'd learned. But the alternative was staying trapped forever in a reality where hope was policy and idealism was currency. "Deal," he said. "But I want access to your database. Everything you've got on dimensional physics, wormhole mechanics, whatever science lets you people teleport and fly faster than light. If I'm stuck here, I want to understand the cage I'm in." "Granted. Bashir, get him cleared for discharge. Major, arrange quarters and station access credentials." Sisko stood, extended his hand. "Welcome to Deep Space Nine, Mr. Riddick. Try not to kill anyone who doesn't deserve it." Riddick shook the offered hand, feeling the strength in Sisko's grip, the kind that came from commanding in crisis, from making decisions that cost lives and living with the weight. "Captain," he said, "everyone deserves it eventually. Just a question of timing." Sisko's smile held no humor. "Then I hope we're on the same side when that timing comes." As Riddick left the infirmary with Kira to arrange his new quarters, Bashir turned to Sisko with concern evident on his genetically enhanced features. "Benjamin, are you sure about this? He's dangerous. Unpredictable. Everything Starfleet trains us not to be. Which is exactly why we need him, Julian." Sisko watched through the infirmary window as Riddick and Kira walked the promenade, the Bajoran major maintaining careful distance, the dimensional refugee cataloging every exit and threat with professional paranoia. The Dominion plays by rules we're only beginning to understand. Sometimes you need someone who doesn't play by any rules at all. And if he turns on us? Then we deal with it. But I don't think he will. You know what I saw on that transport. Not just a killer. A protector. Someone who could have walked away, could have saved himself and left those civilians to die. He didn't. That tells me something about who Richard B. Riddick really is, underneath all the scars and survival instinct. The habitat ring on Deep Space Nine curved through space like a wheel's rim, its inner surface lined with quarters that ranged from Spartan crew accommodations to family suites where children grew up watching stars through viewports. Major Kira led Riddick through corridors where Bajorans, humans, and a dozen other species coexisted in the fragile peace that passed for normal on a station that straddled the line between Federation idealism and frontier reality. "This is you," Kira said, palming open a door to reveal quarters that were functional but not luxurious. A bed, a replicator, a desk with computer terminal, a viewport showing the curve of Bajorans below, painted in swirls of russet and gold. Computer access is limited to general databases. You want classified information, you go through Sisko or DAX. Replicators programmed for standard rations. If you need specific items, submit requests through the quartermaster. Riddick stepped inside, his eyes immediately cataloging the space with tactical assessment. One entrance, no alternate exits, viewport too small for egress, walls thick enough to muffle sound but not stop weapons fire. A cell with better furniture. You don't trust this, Kira observed, reading his body language. Good. Neither would I. He turned to face her, studying the Bajoran woman with interest. She carried herself like a soldier, but the small earring marking her faith, the way her hand never strayed far from her phaser, this was someone who'd learned violence through necessity, not training. You fought in a war, he said. It wasn't a question. The occupation. Cardassians controlled Bajorans for 50 years. Strip-mined our planet, murdered our people, called it bringing order to chaos. Her voice carried old anger, controlled but never extinguished. I joined the resistance when I was 12. Learned to make explosives from farm chemicals, ambush patrols, disappear into the hills. We won eventually, but it cost us a generation. 12. Riddick processed that, a child turned soldier, innocence sacrificed to survival. Younger than me when I learned to kill. Does it get easier? No. It just gets necessary. Kira met his gaze without flinching from those silver eyes. Sisko thinks you can help us fight smarter. I think you're a variable we can't control. But I also saw what you did on that transport. You didn't have to save those people. You chose to. That counts for something. Don't make me a hero, Major. Heroes get expectations. I just do what keeps me breathing and occasionally saves people who got unlucky. Fine. Then here's my expectation. You walk this station, you follow our rules. No weapons outside designated areas. No violence unless in self-defense. And if I find out you've hurt someone, anyone, you'll discover that Bajoran resistance fighters learned a lot about making people regret their choices. Riddick's smile held appreciation for the threat's directness. Fair enough. But understand something. I spent my life running from people who wanted to lock me up, study me, or kill me. So if your security chief starts treating me like a lab specimen or your captain decides I'm too dangerous to keep around, I won't wait politely in a cell. I'll disappear. And your station's big, but not big enough to hide from someone who's escaped triple max slams. Then I guess we understand each other. Kira moved toward the door, paused. One more thing. Quark's bar on the promenade. Avoid it for now. Too many people asking questions about the man who killed 21 Jem'Hadar. You want privacy, replicate meals here. You want company. She shrugged. Find it somewhere that won't turn you into a story over Romulan ale. After she left, Riddick stood alone in his assigned quarters, feeling the station's hum through the deck plating. Life support, gravity generators, the distant pulse of the fusion reactors that kept 3,000 people alive in the void. He'd lived on stations before, mining platforms and shipping hubs where corporations ruled and laws bent to profit margins. This place was different. Cleaner. More organized. More naive about the universe's fundamental brutality. He approached the computer terminal, activated it with a touch. Computer, access general database. Subject, dimensional physics and wormhole mechanics. The female voice responded with clinical efficiency. Accessing. Warning. Some materials require advanced theoretical physics background. Would you like a simplified overview? Give me everything. I'll sort what I can understand. For the next 6 hours, Riddick absorbed information with the focus of someone who'd learned to teach himself in prison libraries and stolen datapads. Wormholes, stable Einstein-Rosen bridges connecting distant points in space-time. Subspace, a domain of alternate physics underlying normal space, allowing faster-than-light travel. Dimensional theory, parallel universes separated by quantum barriers that occasionally, catastrophically, intersected. His ship had come through the Bajoran wormhole during a Verteron particle surge. The wormhole's unique properties, stability maintained by beings the Bajorans called prophets, created conditions that could theoretically pierce dimensional membranes. But reproducing those conditions deliberately required technology the Federation didn't have, an understanding of forces that operated beyond conventional physics. In short, he was trapped until someone smarter figured out impossible math. Computer pause. Riddick leaned back, his ribs aching despite Bashir's treatment, his mind wrestling with concepts that didn't translate to the visceral reality he understood. Query: has the Federation encountered other dimensional travelers? Affirmative. Starfleet records indicate 17 documented cases of dimensional displacement over the past century. In 12 cases, subjects were returned to their native dimensions through replication of the original displacement conditions. In 5 cases, subjects remained in this dimension due to irreversible quantum collapse of the dimensional barrier. What happened to the ones who stayed? Records indicate varied outcomes. 3 individuals integrated into Federation society. 2 requested placement in isolated colonies. Long-term psychological profiles suggest difficulty adapting to dimensional displacement, with common symptoms including dissociative disorders, chronic nostalgia, and... Stop. Riddick didn't need a computer reciting clinical descriptions of being a ghost in the wrong universe. He'd lived enough displacement already. Furyan without a Furia, survivor without a home, predator in places that pretended civilization had domesticated the dark. A chime interrupted his thoughts. The door. He opened it to find Lieutenant Commander Jadzia Dax standing in the corridor, her trill spots distinctive against her skin, her eyes bright with scientific curiosity and something else, kindness, maybe, or recognition of a fellow outsider. Mr. Riddick. I hope I'm not disturbing you, but I wanted to discuss your ship's dimensional variance data personally. She held a PADD, but her posture was relaxed, non-threatening. May I come in? He stepped aside. You're the science officer Sisko mentioned. The one who's supposed to figure out how to send me home. Among other responsibilities, yes. Though I should clarify, I'm Jadzia Dax, current host to the Dax symbiont. Dax has lived 8 lifetimes over 300 years, accumulating knowledge and experience across multiple hosts. So when I say I've studied dimensional physics, I mean Dax has studied it through 3 different host perspectives, including Tobin Dax, who was a physicist specializing in quantum mechanics. Riddick processed that information with the same clinical interest he'd give to learning an opponent's fighting style. You're saying you're 2 people in one body? Essentially. The symbiont carries memories and personality traits from previous hosts while I, Jadzia, maintain my own identity. It's complicated, but relevant to your situation. Dax has encountered dimensional anomalies before. During Curzon Dax's lifetime, my predecessor, we investigated a similar case near the Gamma Quadrant. Did you send them home? Yes. But the circumstances were different. The dimensional barrier hadn't fully collapsed. Your case, she consulted her PADD, shows complete quantum signature divergence. Your universe's fundamental constants, Planck's constant, the speed of light, even gravitational constants, they're microscopically different from ours. Not enough to be immediately fatal, but enough that your biology is constantly compensating for environmental variance. Which means sending you home isn't just a matter of opening a portal. We need to reverse engineer the exact conditions that brought you here, then target your specific dimensional coordinates with precision measured in quantum decimals. It's... She paused, choosing words carefully. Theoretically possible but practically unprecedented. Riddick absorbed this with the resignation of someone who'd spent his life facing impossible odds. How long? Months, maybe years. And that assumes we get cooperation from the entities inside the wormhole, the prophets. They exist outside linear time, don't communicate in ways we fully understand, and have their own agenda. If they brought you here deliberately, why would they? Dax's expression shifted, Curiosity mixing with trill wisdom accumulated over centuries? That's the question. The prophets rarely act without purpose. They've manipulated events before, sending visions, altering timelines, intervening in ways that serve their perception of Bajor's destiny. You appearing during a Dominion war escalation, saving Federation civilians, demonstrating combat capabilities we desperately need. She trailed off, implication hanging heavy. You think your wormhole gods brought me here to be a weapon. I think the prophets operate on scales we don't comprehend. Whether you're a weapon, a teacher, or something else entirely. Dax shrugged with centuries-old acceptance of mystery. We may not know until whatever purpose they have unfolds. Riddick moved to the viewport, staring at Bajor's curve against the stars. I don't believe in gods. Seen too much that proves the universe runs on violence and luck, not divine plans. But if something brought me here deliberately used me. His hands clenched. I'll find a way to make them regret it. Or, Dax suggested gently, you could choose to see this as an opportunity. You're not in your universe anymore. The people hunting you, the bounties, the slate of violence that defines you there. Here, you get to choose who you are. What you become. I'm a killer, Lieutenant. That doesn't change because I change dimensions. Jadzia Dax has been a killer too. Curzon Dax fought in border conflicts. Toria's Dax piloted combat ships. We carry memories of violence alongside memories of love, discovery, loss. What defines us isn't what we've done, but what we choose to do next. She moved to stand beside him at the viewport. Sisko sees potential in you. So do I. Not just as a tactical asset, but as someone who survived impossible circumstances and retained enough humanity to save 60 strangers. Don't put that on me. I saved them because... He stopped, unsure himself why he'd made that choice. Because deep down, Richard B. Riddick isn't just a survivor. He's someone who remembers what it's like to watch his world burn and wishes he could have saved it. Dax's voice carried the weight of lifetimes. I've lived long enough to recognize that kind of pain. It doesn't make you weak. It makes you dangerous. To enemies, yes, but also to the version of yourself that pretends not to care. Before Riddick could respond, the station's comm system crackled with Kira's urgent voice. All senior staff to ops immediately. We have a situation. Dax tapped her comm badge. On my way. What's happening? Distress call from a Maquis cell in the Badlands. They're requesting asylum on Deep Space Nine. And they claim they have intelligence on a Dominion operation that could change the entire war. Riddick and Dax exchanged glances. The scientist intrigued by mystery, the survivor recognizing the scent of a trap. Maquis, Riddick said. Quark mentioned them. Who are they? Federation colonists who rejected the peace treaty with Cardassia. They fight a guerrilla war in the demilitarized zone, terrorists to some, freedom fighters to others. Starfleet officially disavows them, but Dax's smile held ancient trill understanding of moral complexity. The galaxy's rarely as simple as official positions suggest. Sounds like people I'd understand. Then you should come to ops. If this intelligence is real, if the Dominion is planning something significant, we'll need every perspective we can get. Including one from a man who thinks like prey and fights like a predator. They moved through the habitat ring toward the central core, Riddick following the Trill science officer into a situation that would test whether he could truly choose who to be in a universe that didn't know his past. Behind them, through the viewport in his quarters, Bajorans rotated in silence, a world reborn from occupation, watching the station above with hope that freedom once won could be maintained. Ops buzzed with controlled urgency when Riddick and Dax arrived. The circular command center's upper level gave Captain Sisko a commander's view of his domain. Tactical displays painting the Bajoran sector in real-time sensor data, communications channels crackling with traffic from Federation vessels, and at the center of it all, a distress signal pulsing like a wounded heartbeat. Sisko stood at the central console, his posture radiating the tension of a man weighing impossible decisions. Major Kira worked tactical, her fingers dancing across Cardassian-designed controls. Chief O'Brien monitored communications, his engineer's pragmatism evident in the skeptical set of his jaw. Commander Worf, recently transferred from the Enterprise, manned the weapons station, his Klingon features set in permanent warrior readiness. Report, Sisko ordered as Dax took her science station. Kira pulled up the distress signals source on the main view screen. Maquis Raider Val Jean, heavily damaged, broadcasting on emergency frequencies. They emerged from the Badlands plasma storms 12 minutes ago. Life support failing, engines offline. They're claiming pursuit by Cardassian patrol ships, but our long-range sensors show no Cardassian signatures in the area. Could be cloaked, O'Brien suggested. Cardassians don't usually waste resources chasing individual Maquis cells unless there's something valuable involved. Or it's a trap, Worf rumbled, his hand resting on the tactical console like a weapon waiting to be drawn. The Maquis are desperate. Dominion pressure has driven them to increasingly reckless actions. They may be attempting to lure us into Cardassian space, creating an incident that justifies Dominion intervention. Riddick stood near the upper railing, observing but not interfering. This was their station, their war, their protocols. But he recognized the dynamic, experienced officers debating strategy while the clock ticked toward a decision point that would define outcomes. Sisko noticed him. Mr. Riddick, you've been quiet. Thoughts? All eyes turned to the dimensional refugee. Riddick moved to the tactical display, studying the Badlands region, a vast area of plasma storms and sensor scrambling interference where ships could hide, ambush, or disappear entirely. Question, Riddick said. This Maquis ship, they got weapons? Minimal, Kira replied. Outdated phasers, maybe a photon torpedo or two if they haven't expended them. Nothing that could threaten Deep Space Nine or seriously damage a Cardassian warship. But enough to be annoying. Enough to make Cardassians want them dead. Riddick traced the distress signal's origin point. They're not running from Cardassians. If they were, they'd have stayed in the Badlands where sensor interference gives them advantage. They came out into open space, broadcasting loud enough for everyone to hear. That's not escape behavior. That's bait. Bait for what? Sisko asked, his tone sharpening with respect for the tactical assessment. For you. For Starfleet. They want rescue, asylum, and whatever protection your Federation offers. Which means either they're genuinely desperate. Riddick met Sisko's eyes. Or they've got something valuable enough that getting captured by Cardassians is worse than trusting people who officially abandoned them. Dax checked her console. Benjamin, I'm picking up unusual subspace fluctuations near the Badlands perimeter. Could be residual plasma discharge, but the pattern's irregular. Almost like cloaked ships maintaining position. Worf finished. If Cardassian vessels are waiting in sensor shadow, they would create exactly that signature. The Maquis ship is indeed bait. The question is whether we are the intended prey. Sisko's jaw tightened. The Prime Directive didn't technically apply to the Maquis. They were former Federation citizens who'd chosen to fight outside the law. Starfleet policy was officially neutral, which in practice meant letting them die when Cardassian or Dominion forces caught them. But policy and conscience didn't always align, especially when the people dying had once been neighbors, friends, colleagues. Open a channel to the Val Jean, Sisko ordered. The view screen shifted to show the interior of a Maquis raider, smoke-filled, emergency lighting casting everything in harsh red, and at the center, a woman. Human, maybe 40, her face marked by burns and determination. Behind her, a crew of perhaps 8 struggled to keep their dying ship functional. This is Captain Catherine Janeway of the Val Jean, she said, her voice carrying command authority despite the chaos around her. We're requesting emergency asylum on Deep Space Nine. Our ship is critically damaged. We have wounded. And we have intelligence on a Dominion operation that Starfleet Command needs to hear immediately. Captain Janeway, Sisko replied, his tone measured. I'm Captain Benjamin Sisko. You understand that granting asylum to Maquis personnel violates treaty agreements with the Cardassian Union. I need more than vague promises of intelligence to justify that risk. Janeway's expression hardened. 3 days ago, my crew intercepted Dominion communications while raiding a Cardassian supply depot. They're planning something called Operation Purity, a biological weapon designed to target specific genetic markers. Not just Founder's enemies. Federation species. Bajorans. Humans. Anyone who doesn't fit their template for acceptable life. The ops crew exchanged glances. Biological weapons violated every treaty, every convention, every principle the Federation held sacred. If true, this represented an escalation beyond military conquest into genocide. That's a serious allegation, Sisko said carefully. Do you have proof? We have data we extracted before the depot's self-destruct triggered. Genetic sequences, chemical formulas, deployment vectors. But our science officer was killed in the escape, and our computer core is failing. If you want this intelligence intact, you need to beam us aboard before our ship explodes or the Cardassians finish what they started. Riddick watched Janeway's face on the view screen with professional interest. She was lying, not about the intelligence, but about something. The micro-expressions, the way her eyes tracked off camera, the tension in her shoulders that didn't match someone pleading for rescue. She was running a play, gambling that Sisko's conscience would override his caution. Captain, Riddick said quietly, just loud enough for Sisko to hear. She's not telling you everything. Whatever they've got, it's worth more than asylum. Worth risking your diplomatic situation. Worth leading Cardassians to your doorstep. Sisko glanced at him, then back to Janeway. Captain, I'm reading weapons signatures around your position. If Cardassian ships are waiting to ambush any rescue attempt, then you'll have to be fast. Janeway interrupted. I didn't join the Maquis to play safe, Captain Sisko. I joined because the Federation abandoned colonists to Cardassian brutality in the name of peace. If you're willing to let my crew die for the same reason, then we've learned nothing from the mistakes that created this mess. But if you want intelligence that could save millions of lives... Her voice cracked, genuine emotion breaking through tactical calculation. Then beam us aboard and trust that some fights are worth the risk. Sisko turned to his senior staff. Opinions. Fast. It's a trap, Worf stated flatly. We should send a runabout with minimal crew. If Cardassians attack, we lose a small vessel, not the station's protection. The intelligence could be legitimate, Dax countered. If the Dominion is developing biological weapons, we need that data yesterday. The science alone. We can't verify authenticity until we examine their computer core, O'Brien added. Which means bringing them aboard regardless. Question is whether we do it now or after debating while they suffocate. Kira's voice cut through with Bajoran directness. We abandoned the Maquis once. Some of them fought for Bajorans during the occupation, risked everything for people they'd never met. I say we return the favor. All eyes returned to Sisko. Command decisions, the kind that got logged in Starfleet reports and haunted captains' dreams, came down to moments like this. Trust instinct or protocol. Risk lives for potential intelligence. Choose between Federation policy and the principles that policy supposedly protected. Sisko looked at Riddick. You called her play. What's your read? She's desperate, she's dangerous, and she's not telling you the whole truth, Riddick said. But she believes what she's saying about that biological weapon. Seen enough liars to know when someone's scared of consequences bigger than themselves. He paused. Your call, Captain. But if it were me, I'd beam them aboard and deal with whatever hell follows. Because if she's right about that weapon, the hell of not acting is worse. Sisko held his gaze for 3 heartbeats, then turned to O'Brien. Chief, lock onto the Valjean crew and beam them directly to Cargo Bay 2. Erect containment fields and post security. Kira, go to yellow alert. Worf, shields up and load torpedo bays. If those Cardassian ships decloak, I want options. Aye, sir. The responses came in unison. O'Brien's fingers danced across his console. Transporter lock established. 8 life signs. Energizing. On the viewscreen, Janeway and her crew shimmered out of existence just as the Val gene began its final death spiral, hull breaches venting atmosphere in crystalline clouds. Seconds later, the Raider's fusion core went critical, detonating in a flash of light that briefly illuminated the plasma storms behind it. And then, exactly as predicted, 3 Cardassian Gala-class warships decloaked, their weapons hot, their hulls bearing fresh combat scars. The lead ship's commander appeared on the viewscreen, Cardassian, his neck ridges pronounced, his expression carrying the reptilian coldness of someone who'd killed for state policy and slept soundly afterward. Captain Sisko, the Cardassian said, his voice dripping contempt. I am Gul Evek of the Fourth Order. You have committed an act of war by harboring Maquis terrorists. Surrender them immediately, or we will interpret your actions as a direct violation of the Federation Cardassian Treaty. Sisko's response was ice wrapped in velvet. Gul Evek, you're in Federation space without authorization. 3 warships decloaking in attack formation constitutes the real treaty violation. Stand down and state your business, or leave our territory before I'm forced to defend it. Those criminals murdered Cardassian citizens and destroyed military assets. They are ours by right of pursuit. They're under Federation protection now. If you have legal grievances, submit them through proper diplomatic channels. Sisko's tone hardened. But you and I both know this isn't about law, Gul Evek. It's about what they know. What they stole from your Dominion masters. Evek's expression flickered, surprise, rage, calculation. You have no idea what you've just involved yourself in, Sisko. The Dominion does not tolerate interference in strategic operations. Your precious Federation principles won't protect you when Jem'Hadar's ships come through that wormhole. Then I guess we'll find out who's better at fighting dirty, Dominion soldiers or people defending their homes. Sisko gestured to Worf. Target their weapons arrays. Fire on my mark if they don't withdraw in 30 seconds. The Cardassian ships held position, weapons charged, a standoff measured in heartbeats and political calculation. Finally, Gul Evek's pragmatism overrode his pride. This isn't over, Sisko. The Dominion remembers its enemies. The 3 warships cloaked and vanished, leaving Deep Space Nine alone with the debris of the Val gene and 8 Maquis prisoners whose intelligence might justify the diplomatic catastrophe Sisko had just triggered. In Cargo Bay 2, security officers surrounded Janeway and her crew, exhausted, injured but alive. She met the guards' weapons with the calm of someone who'd gambled everything and won. Riddick stood in ops, watching the tactical display, and felt the familiar weight of consequences settling like a cloak. Whatever the Maquis had stolen, whatever Operation Purity represented, it had just dragged him deeper into a war he'd tried to avoid. Mr. Riddick, Sisko said, his voice carrying both authority and something else, acknowledgement, maybe, or the recognition that sometimes outsiders saw truths insiders couldn't. You're with me. I want your assessment of Captain Janeway when we interrogate her. No Starfleet protocols, no diplomatic niceties. Just your read on whether she's worth the war I might have just started. Already told you she's dangerous, Riddick replied. But if you're asking if she's worth it. He thought of 60 civilians following him through darkness, of a little girl who believed he'd come back, of the choice between surviving alone and fighting for something that mattered. Guess we'll find out together. They descended to Cargo Bay 2, where answers waited alongside the certainty that some intelligence, once learned, couldn't be unlearned. And in the darkness between stars, Dominion ships recalculated their strategies, recognizing that Deep Space Nine had just become more than a military target. It had become a symbol of resistance, defiance, and the dangerous idea that survival sometimes meant choosing principles over safety. The war had found Riddick again. This time, he couldn't just disappear into the dark. Cargo Bay 2 had been converted into a makeshift detention center, force fields separating the Maquis crew from the rest of the station, medical supplies scattered where Dr. Bashir had treated burns and shrapnel wounds, security officers maintaining watchful positions with phasers set to heavy stun. The 8 prisoners sat or stood in exhausted silence, their rebel defiance muted by the recognition that they traded one death sentence for uncertain captivity. Captain Catherine Janeway stood apart from her crew, her posture military straight despite the burns on her face and the blood staining her uniform. When Sisko and Riddick entered, her eyes tracked them with the calculating intensity of someone trained to read power dynamics and exploit weakness. "Captain Sisko," she said, her voice hoarse from smoke inhalation. "Thank you for the rescue. I know what it costs you politically. You don't know half of it yet," Sisko replied, his tone neutral. "Ghoul Evek just transmitted a formal complaint to Starfleet Command. The Cardassian government is calling your rescue an act of war. The Dominion ambassador on Cardassia Prime issued a statement saying Federation interference in internal security matters will have consequences." He paused, letting the weight settle. "So before I decide whether harboring you was worth starting an interstellar incident, I need to see this intelligence you claim justifies everything." Janeway gestured to one of her crew, a Bajoran man holding a damaged isolinear data rod like it was scripture. "Petron, give the captain what we recovered." The Bajoran stepped forward cautiously, extending the rod towards Sisko. Riddick intercepted it first, his movements smooth and unthreatening but absolute. He held the rod up to emergency lighting, examining it with eyes that caught details normal vision missed. "It's been accessed recently," Riddick observed. "Someone copied data off this within the last few hours. Before you came through the Badlands." Janeway's expression didn't shift, but Petron's did, a microsecond of surprise quickly suppressed. Riddick filed that reaction away, added it to the growing list of inconsistencies in their story. "We reviewed the data to verify its authenticity," Janeway said smoothly. "Standard intelligence protocol. You don't bring unverified information to Starfleet without confirming you're not delivering Dominion disinformation." "Or," Riddick suggested, "you copied it because this rod's going to Starfleet and you wanted insurance. Something to trade if things went wrong. Something to sell if desperation got worse than it already is." Janeway's eyes narrowed, reassessing the scarred man who'd just read her contingency planning like an open book. "And you are? Someone who's run cons, traded intelligence, and survived by being 3 steps ahead of people trying to kill him," Riddick replied. "So let's skip the part where you pretend you're noble freedom fighters and I pretend I'm buying it. You've got leverage. We've got asylum. What happens next depends on whether that data rod contains what you say it does." Sisko accepted the rod from Riddick, handed it to Dax, who'd entered the cargo bay with a tricorder and scientific curiosity burning behind her trill spots. "Commander, analysis." Dax inserted the rod into her tricorder, her centuries of accumulated knowledge focusing through Jadzia's scientific expertise. For 90 seconds she scrolled through data streams, genetic sequences, chemical formulas, deployment projections, her expression shifting from interest to horror. "Benjamin," she said quietly, "this is real. Operation Purity is a polygenetic pathogen designed to target specific DNA markers. The Dominion's geneticists have engineered a virus that attacks cellular structures unique to non-changeling species. Humans, Bajorans, Vulcans, Andorians, anyone whose genetic code doesn't match founder biology. Mortality rate in simulations exceeds 90% within 72 hours of exposure." The cargo bay fell into silence heavy as a grave. Even the security officers shifted uncomfortably, recognizing that they were staring at genocide rendered in chemical equations. "Deployment vectors?" Sisko asked, his voice controlled but his hands clenched white-knuckled. "Atmospheric dispersal via orbital platforms. Water supply contamination. Subspace carrier waves that could spread across light years." Dax's voice carried 300 years of wisdom confronting an evil that transcended lifetimes. "If the Dominion releases this in the Alpha Quadrant, they could eliminate entire populations without firing a shot. Leave infrastructure intact for founder occupation while clearing away inferior solids. Kira's voice crackled over the comm system from Ops, having monitored the conversation. Captain, I'm sending this to Starfleet Command immediately. They need to belay that order. Sisko interrupted. Major, maintain communication silence for now. This intelligence is too sensitive to risk Dominion interception. We handle verification internally first. He turned back to Janeway, and Riddick saw something shift in Sisko's expression, the transition from captain to commander, from diplomat to warrior facing existential threat. Where did you get this? Sisko demanded. Cardassian supply depot in the Alma sector, Janeway replied. We raided it expecting weapons, maybe intelligence on patrol routes. Instead we found a Vorder research team conducting field tests on prisoners. Bajorans, mostly. Some humans from captured Federation vessels. Her voice cracked. They were testing infection rates, monitoring death progression, refining the formula. We freed the survivors, 11 people out of 40. And extracted the research data before their self-destruct triggered. The survivors, Riddick said. Where are they now? Janeway's silence answered before her words did. Dead. The pathogen had a delayed activation sequence. They died en route to our base, screaming as their cells tore themselves apart. We spaced the bodies before contamination could spread. She met Riddick's silver eyes without flinching. So yes, Mr. Whoever you are, we copied that data. Because 40 people died to get it, and I'll be damned if their sacrifice gets buried in Starfleet bureaucracy while the Dominion perfects their genocide weapon. Riddick studied her, the guilt behind her defiance, the exhaustion beneath her command presence, the calculation that said she'd do whatever necessary to make those deaths mean something. He'd seen that look before, in mirrors and in the faces of people who'd survived when others hadn't. She's telling the truth, he said to Sisko. About the data, the raid, the deaths. She's still holding something back, but it's not about the weapon. How can you possibly know that? Janeway demanded. Because I've been where you are. Watched people die for causes that seemed righteous at the time. Carried weight that never gets lighter, no matter how many enemies you kill or how many victories you claim. Riddick moved closer to the force field, close enough that Janeway could see her reflection in his eyes. You're not Maquis because you believe in their cause. You're Maquis because someone you cared about died in the demilitarized zone and the Federation's peace treaty made their death legal. So now you fight, and you tell yourself it's about justice, but really it's about making sure their death mattered. Janeway's composure fractured, just for a moment, grief and rage bleeding through before she locked it down again. My fiancé, she whispered. Mark. He was a colonist on Dorvan V. When the Federation ceded the planet to Cardassia, he stayed. Believed peaceful coexistence was possible. The Cardassians executed him 3 months later for sedition. His crime was teaching Bajoran refugees to read. Sisko's expression softened infinitesimally. I'm sorry for your loss, Captain. But personal grief doesn't justify terrorism. Neither does diplomatic convenience justify abandoning citizens to butchers. Janeway's fire returned. The Maquis exists because the Federation failed us. We fight because someone has to. And if that makes us criminals in your eyes, then at least we're criminals who give a damn about the people Starfleet writes off as acceptable losses. Enough, Sisko said, his command voice cutting through rising tensions. Philosophical debates can wait. Right now, we have confirmed intelligence on a Dominion biological weapon that threatens the entire Alpha Quadrant. Commander Dax, I want full analysis of that pathogen structure. Find weaknesses, potential countermeasures, anything that could help us develop a vaccine or neutralization protocol. Already working on it, Dax replied, her tricorder humming as it processed terabytes of genetic data. Chief O'Brien, lock down all external communications. Nothing leaves this station until we've verified this intelligence and determined our response strategy. Major Kira, increase security patrols and implement biohazard protocols throughout the station. The orders flowed with practiced efficiency, Sisko's command staff executing without hesitation. But Riddick noticed something else. The Maquis crew exchanging glances, subtle hand signals passing between Janeway and her people. They were planning something. Contingency within contingency, the hallmark of survivors who never trusted rescue to stay rescue. "Captain," Riddick said quietly to Sisko, "they're not done playing. Whatever their endgame is, it's more than just asylum." Before Sisko could respond, alarms shrieked throughout the station. Dax's voice carried urgency over the calm. "Benjamin, we have multiple contacts emerging from the wormhole. Dominion signatures. At least 20 Jem'Hadar attack ships, supported by 3 battlecruisers. They're not hailing. They're just coming." The cargo bay's lights shifted to red alert. Security officers readied weapons, though phasers meant nothing against a fleet. Janeway's crew stirred, recognizing that their rescue had just become a siege. Sisko tapped his comm badge. "All hands, battle stations. Launch the Defiant. Recall all Federation vessels within 3 light years. This is not a drill." He turned to Worf's voice on the comm. "Commander, tactical assessment. We are outnumbered 4-1. Worf replied with Klingon bluntness. "Station weapons can inflict casualties, but against this force, we cannot win. We can only delay." "Then we delay," Sisko said. "Every minute gives Starfleet time to respond, gives us time to protect that intelligence." Riddick felt the familiar weight of impossible odds settling across his shoulders. He'd faced death before. In slam cities, on alien worlds, against enemies that outnumbered and outgunned him. Survival meant finding angles others missed, exploiting weaknesses in superior force, and knowing when to fight and when to run. But Deep Space Nine couldn't run. 3,000 civilians, families, children like Sarah who trusted him. They were trapped on a station about to become a battlefield. "I can help," Riddick said. Sisko looked at him with the expression of a commander weighing every asset. "How?" "Jem'Hadar fight by doctrine. I've already killed 21 of them. I know their patterns, their weaknesses, how they think." Riddick gestured toward the cargo bay's weapons locker. "You're going to be boarded. When you are, you'll need people who can fight in close quarters, in the dark, in conditions where your pretty Federation training becomes a liability. You're volunteering to defend the station?" Sisko's skepticism was understandable. "Why? This isn't your war. You said yourself you don't care about our conflicts." Riddick thought about that. About 60 civilians he'd saved on a transport. About a little girl who believed in promises. About Dax's suggestion that he could choose who to be in this universe that didn't know his past. "Maybe I'm tired of running," he said finally. "Or maybe I just really hate bullies with bigger guns. Either way, you need fighters who aren't afraid to get bloody. I qualify." Janeway stepped forward, her Starfleet training evident despite her Maquis allegiance. "Captain Sisko, my crew and I are combat experienced. We've fought Cardassians, Jem'Hadar, conditions that would make your Academy graduates cry. Give us weapons, and we'll defend this station like it's our own." "You're prisoners," Kira's voice interjected over calm. "Offering to fight for the people who locked you up?" "We're fighters," Janeway corrected. "Who understand that if the Dominion wins here, Operation Purity gets deployed. My vendetta against the Federation matters less than stopping genocide. So yes, Major, we'll fight. With you, for you, or in spite of you, but we'll fight." Sisko looked between Riddick and Janeway, 2 wild cards offering their violence in service of a cause either fully trusted. Outside, through the station's hull, sensors tracked Dominion ships taking up attack positions, their weapons charging for an assault that would test every principle the Federation claimed to uphold. "Odo," Sisko said into his comm badge. "Release the Maquis prisoners to arms. Riddick, you're with Commander Worf on internal defense coordination. Janeway, your crew answers to Major Kira. You fight smart, you follow orders, and if this station survives, we'll discuss asylum terms afterward." "Understood," they replied in unison, the dimensional refugee, the Maquis captain, united by circumstances that made strange allies necessary. As the force field dropped and weapons were distributed, Riddick accepted a phaser rifle with professional assessment, then pulled his blades and checked their edges. Around him, Maquis rebels and Starfleet officers prepared for battle with the grim recognition that survival would be measured in blood and sacrifice. The Dominion fleet completed its formation. 23 ships against 1 station. Hundreds of Jem'Hadar soldiers bred for killing against defenders fighting for home. On Deep Space Nine's viewscreen, Avorta appeared, pale, serene, his clone features carrying the absolute certainty of someone who believed the Founders will justify any atrocity. "Captain Sisko," Avorta said pleasantly, "I am Weyoun. The Founders have decreed that your interference with Operation Purity cannot be tolerated. Surrender the Maquis prisoners and all data related to Dominion research, and we will allow your civilian population to evacuate before we destroy your station." Sisko's response carried the weight of a man who'd faced gods and refused to kneel. "Tell your Founders that Deep Space Nine doesn't surrender. Not to you. Not to anyone. If they want this station, they'll have to take it from the hands of people willing to die defending it." Weyoun's smile never wavered. "How very solid of you. The Founders will enjoy the irony of your corpses proving the superiority of changeling governance. Begin the assault." The first Jem'Hadar ships opened fire. Polaron beams hammered Deep Space Nine's shields, lighting the void with energy designed to breach Federation defenses. The station shuddered, its Cardassian-built structure absorbing punishment, while phaser arrays returned fire, torpedoes streaking toward enemy vessels in desperate salvos. The Battle of Deep Space Nine had begun. And in Cargo Bay 2, Riddick checked his weapons one last time, feeling the familiar calm that came before violence. He'd survived impossible odds before. Prison breaks. Merc ambushes. Alien worlds where everything tried to kill him. This was just another Tuesday. Except this time, he wasn't fighting alone. And that changed everything. The Dominion assault hit Deep Space Nine like a hammer striking glass, brutal, precise, designed to shatter rather than occupy. Polaron beams carved through the station's shields in stuttering cascades of emerald fire, each impact sending tremors through bulkheads that had survived Cardassian construction and Federation retrofit. The Defiant launched from its docking port, Commander Worf at the helm, its ablative armor and pulse phasers the only mobile defense against 23 ships that viewed sacrifice as religious duty. Riddick moved through the station's lower decks with Worf's internal defense team, a mixed unit of Starfleet security, Bajoran militia, and now Maquis rebels who traded cells for combat positions. The Klingon commander had divided Deep Space Nine into defensive sectors, anticipating that Jem'Hadar boarding parties would target critical systems, ops, the fusion reactors, docking rings where civilian evacuation ships waited for clearance that might never come. "They will strike here first," Worf said, his bat'leth gripped with the casual familiarity of a man born to war. He gestured to a three-dimensional schematic of the station's infrastructure. "Reactor control, level 32. Disable our power generation, and shields fail. Without shields, they can transport entire battalions directly into populated sections." Riddick studied the schematic with tactical assessment honed in environments where hesitation meant death. Choke points? 3 access corridors. We fortify each with overlapping fire positions, force fields at backup intervals, and Worf's Klingon pragmatism surfaced. Warriors willing to hold position when retreat would be tactically sound. "You're talking about dying to buy time. I am talking about victory through sacrifice. A concept your Federation service record suggests you understand poorly." "Don't have a service record, Commander. Just a body count and scars proving I'm better at killing than dying." Riddick checked his phaser rifle's power cell, then his blades. Federation technology backed by Furyan steel, civilization and savagery balanced on his belt. "But I get your point. Hold the line or lose everything. What do you want me?" Worf's expression shifted, not quite respect, but acknowledgement that competence transcended species or origin. "Corridor Epsilon, Section 31. Defend the primary access to reactor control. Major Kira will coordinate from Ops. Janeway's Maquis fighters are dispersed throughout defensive positions. When the Jem'Hadar board, and they will, you kill them before they reach the reactors. And if they get through, then you follow them into the reactor room and kill them there. Jem'Hadar do not fear death. They worship it. You must be more devoted to violence than they are to martyrdom. Riddick's smile held no warmth. I can work with that. He descended into Deep Space Nine's industrial guts. Corridors designed by Cardassians for function over comfort, all harsh angles and exposed conduits, emergency lighting casting everything in amber gloom. The defensive position Worf had assigned him was perfect for ambush, a junction where 3 corridors converge, creating a kill zone with limited cover and no room for the formation tactics Jem'Hadar preferred. 2 Starfleet security officers already held the position. Young, nervous, their academy training evident in textbook stances that would get them killed the moment fighting turned personal. Riddick recognized their type, good soldiers who never faced an enemy that wanted to die killing you. You're the dimensional guy, one said, a human lieutenant with the kind of fresh face that belonged in recruitment posters, not firefights. Heard you took out 6 Jem'Hadar on that transport in the dark. 21 total, Riddick corrected, setting up behind a support column that offered cover from 2 approach vectors. But who's counting? Any advice? The other officer asked, Andorian, her antennae twitching with anxiety that her species' warrior reputation couldn't mask. Yeah. When they come, shoot center mass until they drop, then keep shooting. Jem'Hadar don't go down easy. And if the lights cut out, Riddick's eyes caught emergency lighting, reflected it back in silver. Stay low and trust that something's moving in the dark on your side. Before either could respond, the station shuddered violently. Somewhere above, shields failed with a cascade resonance that screamed through structural supports. Alarms shrieked. Kira's voice crackled over station-wide calm. All hands brace for boarding action. Jem'Hadar signatures detecting on multiple decks. Internal defense teams engage at will. Civilian population move to designated shelters immediately. This is not a drill. The transporter harmonics were distinctive. A thrumming dissonance as Dominion technology forced materialization through interference patterns designed to prevent exactly that. 6 columns of light resolved into 6 Jem'Hadar soldiers, gray-skinned and armored, their Cardassian blades already drawn, their Polaron disruptors seeking targets. The Starfleet officers opened fire with textbook precision, sustained phaser beams, proper trigger discipline, exactly what Academy instructors taught. 2 Jem'Hadar fell, their enhanced physiology insufficient against directed energy weapons at close range. The other 4 charged. Riddick let them come, counting heartbeats, reading their formation. Standard Jem'Hadar tactics: close the distance, neutralize ranged advantage, rely on superior strength in melee combat. Predictable. Fatal. He waited until they were 3 meters away, then triggered the improvised modification he made to the corridor's environmental controls. Atmosphere vented through emergency release valves, instantly dropping pressure and temperature. The Jem'Hadar stumbled, not incapacitated, but slowed, their genetically engineered bodies compensating for environmental shift. Riddick moved into the gap. His first blade took a soldier in the throat, the Furyan strike punching through armor gaps with surgical precision. The second blade opened another soldier from ribs to spine, finding the organs that even Jem'Hadar conditioning couldn't protect. The phaser rifle barked twice, taking the third soldier in the face at contact distance. The fourth soldier's Cardassian whistled toward Riddick's head. He ducked, felt the blade's passage ruffle his hair, came up inside the Jem'Hadar's guard and drove both blades into the gap between chest plate and helmet. The soldier died gurgling, eyes wide with the surprise that something could kill faster than Ketracel white-bread fury. 6 bodies. 11 seconds. The Starfleet officers stared at Riddick like they'd witnessed a natural disaster given human form. Like I said, Riddick commented, wiping his blades on a dead soldier's armor, Center mass. Keep shooting. And don't hesitate. Before they could respond, more transporters cycled. This time, 12 Jem'Hadar materialized in the adjacent corridor. They'd adapted, learned from the first squad's failure, brought overwhelming numbers to the ambush point. Fall back to secondary position, the lieutenant shouted, following doctrine that said you didn't fight 12-3 odds in close quarters. Negative, Riddick countermanded, his voice carrying command authority he'd never officially earned but had learned through survival. They want us to retreat, to abandon this position. We hold here. That's suicide. It's tactics. You retreat, they take this junction, access the reactors, and this station dies. Riddick pulled a photon grenade from his harness. Worf had distributed them with Klingon generosity to anyone willing to use them. So we don't retreat. We make them pay for every meter. He primed the grenade, rolled it into the adjacent corridor, and dove behind the support column as the explosion turned 12 Jem'Hadar into a problem for the afterlife. The blast wave hammered through the junction, collapsing part of the corridor ceiling, creating a debris field that would slow the next wave. The Andorian officer laughed, high and sharp with adrenaline and disbelief. That was insane! That was necessary, Riddick corrected. He checked his ammunition. Phaser rifle at 60%, 2 grenades remaining, blades still sharp. Above them, the battle continued, Defiant engaging Jem'Hadar attack ships, station weapons firing until their capacitors overheated, and somewhere in ops, Sisko making command decisions that would determine whether 3,000 lives survived the night. Kira's voice cut through the chaos. Reactor control status report. Holding, Riddick replied into the comm. Took out 18 Jem'Hadar. Corridor Epsilon is blocked but defendable. How's the big picture? Defiant's taking heavy damage. We've lost shields on the docking ring. Civilian evacuation is behind schedule. Families won't leave without confirmation their homes are lost. And, she paused, the silence heavy. Vorta transmission just came through. They're threatening to deploy a biological weapon on Bajorans if we don't surrender the Operation Purity data. Weon says we have 10 minutes to decide. Riddick felt cold certainty settle in his gut. The Dominion wasn't bluffing. Vorta clones were expendable, Jem'Hadar were tools, and billions of Bajoran lives were acceptable losses in service to Founder ideology. Tell Sisko not to surrender, Riddick said. They deploy that weapon whether you give them the data or not. Only question is whether you give Starfleet time to develop countermeasures. That's what Captain Sisko said. He's transmitting the data now on all subspace frequencies, broadcasting Operation Purity's genetic sequences to every Federation vessel, research station, and colony in range. If the Dominion wants to suppress this information, they'll have to silence hundreds of locations simultaneously. It was brilliant. Desperate. The kind of command decision that saved civilizations or doomed them depending on variables no one could control. More Jem'Hadar materialized in the corridor. Not 6 or 12 this time, but 20, their first barking orders in the guttural Dominion dialect, their weapons hot and their dedication absolute. They'd adapted again, learned that small teams died in ambushes, brought numbers sufficient to overwhelm any defense. The Starfleet officers looked to Riddick, and he saw in their eyes the transition from academy training to combat reality. The moment when you stopped following doctrine and started trusting the person most likely to keep you breathing. New plan, Riddick said. You two fall back to the reactor room. Seal the door behind you. I'll hold them here long enough for you to get clear. That's... The lieutenant started. In order. You stay, we all die. You retreat, you defend the reactor from anyone who gets past me, and maybe this station survives. Riddick's silver eyes held theirs without mercy or doubt. I've survived worse odds. But I need you to give me a reason to. They understood. Sometimes survival meant letting someone else die buying time. Sometimes command meant accepting that sacrifice. The officers retreated. Riddick heard the reactor room door seal, magnetic locks engaging with pneumatic finality. He stood alone in the junction, surrounded by dead Jem'Hadar and flickering emergency lighting, facing 20 soldiers who viewed death as worship. The first stepped forward, his Cardassian raised in challenge. "You fight well, human. But you cannot win. The Founder's will is absolute." "Your Founders aren't here," Riddick replied, pulling his blades. "I am. And where I come from, we don't worship gods. We kill them." He triggered the corridor's emergency bulkheads, massive doors designed to contain hull breaches, now falling like guillotine blades to divide the Jem'Hadar force. 3 soldiers trapped on Riddick's side, 17 on the other, their advance delayed by 10 seconds of cutting through duranium plating. 10 seconds was all Riddick needed. He went Furyan. The rage that lived in his genetics, the combat fury that had kept his species alive on a death world, exploded through conscious control. His heart rate spiked. His muscles flooded with adrenaline derivatives unique to Furyan biology. His perception sharpened, time dilating into crystalline clarity where every movement, every breath, every weapon trajectory became visible patterns he could exploit. The 3 Jem'Hadar attacked in coordinated sequence, their training perfect, their execution flawless. Riddick was faster. His blade severed the first soldier's weapon hand. The second blade opened the second soldier's throat. The phaser rifles but crushed the third soldier's skull with Furyan-enhanced strength that cracked armor plating. They fell, and Riddick kept moving, kept killing, his consciousness reduced to violence as pure mathematics. Angles and timing, force and leverage, the geometry of death executed with precision that transcended mere skill. The bulkhead exploded inward. 17 Jem'Hadar poured through the breach, their weapons firing, their Cardassian blades seeking flesh. Riddick met them in the junction center, a lone figure against impossible odds, and for 90 seconds the corridor became an abattoir where Dominion doctrine met Furyan savagery. He killed 7 before the first Cardassian opened his ribs. Killed 3 more before Polaron fire burned his shoulder. Killed 2 more before exhaustion and blood loss began dragging him down toward the darkness that had always been his refuge. The remaining Jem'Hadar surrounded him, weapons raised for execution. The first approached, respect evident despite ideological certainty. "You fought with honor," the first said. "The Founders will remember your defiance when they remake the galaxy in their perfection." Riddick spat blood, his silver eyes undimmed by dying. "Tell your Founders something for me." "Tell them Richard B. Riddick says they can go to hell. And if they come looking for me there." His smile was terrible. "I'll be waiting." The phaser shot came from behind the Jem'Hadar, Captain Janeway emerging from a maintenance shaft, her Maquis crew flanking her, their weapons cutting through the Dominion soldiers with the brutal efficiency of people who'd learned to fight dirty and survive. The remaining Jem'Hadar fell. The first died last, his eyes holding confusion that rescue could come from enemies turned allies. Janeway knelt beside Riddick, her hands moving to staunch the worst bleeding. "Bashir to Cargo Bay Junction Epsilon." She barked into her comm badge. "Medical emergency. We have a dimensional refugee who's too stubborn to die but might anyway." "Why?" Riddick asked, his consciousness fading. "You got what you wanted. Asylum. Protection. Why come back?" "Because," Janeway said, her voice carrying the weight of Mark's death and 40 prisoners who'd died screaming and every choice that had led her to this moment. "You taught me something. You said I wasn't Maquis for the cause, I was Maquis because I needed their deaths to matter. You were right. But watching you fight alone, sacrifice yourself for people you barely know, for a station that locked you in a cell." She paused. "That reminded me what really matters. Not revenge. Not even justice. Just making sure the people fighting beside you make it home." Riddick's eyes closed. Around him, the station shuddered with impacts, but the reactor held. The defense held. Deep Space Nine remained defiant against Dominion assault, its shields battered but intact, its people bloodied but unbroken. Dr. Bashir arrived moments later, his medical team stabilizing Riddick's injuries with technology that seemed miraculous compared to the frontier medicine Riddick knew. They transported him to the infirmary, where biobeds and dermal regenerators began the slow work of rebuilding what violence had broken. In ops, Captain Sisko watched the Dominion fleet withdraw, Weyoun's face on the viewscreen promising that this defeat was temporary, that the Founders' will would prevail, that Deep Space Nine's resistance only delayed the inevitable. Maybe, Sisko replied, his voice tired but unbowed. But today, the inevitable took a detour. Today, we proved that when people choose to stand together, Federation and Maquis, human and Bajoran, even dimensional refugees who owe us nothing, we can hold the line against forces that claim they're unstoppable. The viewscreen went dark. The Dominion ships vanished into warp, carrying their wounded pride and tactical data that would inform future assaults. But they also carried the knowledge that Deep Space Nine had broadcast Operation Purity's secrets across the quadrant, that hundreds of research teams were already working on countermeasures, that genocide had been exposed before it could be perfected. The battle was over. The war continued. But on this day, in this place, hope had proven stronger than the darkness that sought to extinguish it. 3 days later, Riddick woke in the infirmary to find Sarah sitting beside his biobed, coloring on a PADD with the fierce concentration only children possessed. She looked up when his eyes opened, smiled with uncomplicated joy. "You came back again," she said. "Keep doing that," Riddick replied, his voice rough. "Guess I'm building a reputation." Sisko entered, carrying 2 cups of Ractigino, Klingon coffee strong enough to wake the dead, which felt appropriate. He offered one to Riddick. "The Maquis have been granted provisional asylum," Sisko said. "Starfleet Command reviewed the Operation Purity data and decided that Captain Janeway's intelligence justified the diplomatic complications. She and her crew are being integrated into our tactical operations. And me? You're free to leave whenever Dr. Bashir clears you. Or," Sisko paused, "you're welcome to stay. We could use someone with your skills. No uniform required. No Federation oath. Just a man willing to fight when it matters." Riddick considered that. Home was still out there, in another dimension, another reality. But Dax had explained it might take years to find the way back. Years he could spend running, hiding, surviving alone. Or years he could spend choosing who to become. "I'll stay," Riddick said finally. "For now. Until Dax figures out the dimensional math or until your war ends. Whichever comes first." "Fair enough." Sisko extended his hand. "Welcome to Deep Space Nine, Mr. Riddick. Try not to kill anyone who doesn't deserve it." Riddick shook the offered hand, feeling the weight of a choice that meant more than survival. "Captain," he said, "in my experience, everyone deserves it eventually. But I'll try to wait until they prove it first." Outside the infirmary viewport, Bajorans rotated in silent beauty, a world reborn, watching the station above with renewed hope. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, the Dominion calculated new strategies, adapted to new variables, and prepared for battles yet to come. But for today, Deep Space Nine stood defiant. And Richard B. Riddick, Furyan killer, dimensional refugee, had found something he thought lost forever. A reason to fight for something more than just staying alive. The story of how Riddick entered the Star Trek universe became legend on Deep Space Nine. Station personnel told it in Quark's bar over Romulan ale, embellished it until the dimensional refugee who'd killed 43 Jem'Hadar single-handedly became myth-rivaling Klingon sagas. But those who'd fought beside him knew the truth was more complicated than legend allowed. He remained on the station for 18 months while Dax worked to solve the dimensional equations that might send him home. During that time, he trained Starfleet security in close-quarters combat, consulted on tactics against Jem'Hadar boarding parties, and occasionally vanished into the Badlands on missions that Sisko never officially authorized but always quietly supported. The Dominion war ground on, brutal and unforgiving, testing everything the Federation believed about itself. Operation Purity was neutralized, vaccines developed, deployment platforms destroyed in preemptive strikes. But other horrors emerged to replace it. And through it all, Riddick fought not because he believed in Federation ideals, but because he'd learned that some battles were worth fighting even when victory seemed impossible. When Dax finally discovered the solution, a controlled verteron surged through the wormhole time to quantum fluctuations that occurred once per decade. Riddick stood at the airlock with his salvaged ship ready for departure. Sisko, Kira, Dax, Bashir, even Odo gathered to witness the dimensional refugee's final choice. "You could stay," Dax offered. "Permanently. Make this universe your home." Riddick looked at them, these people who'd given him more than asylum, who'd given him purpose when survival had been his only religion. Then he looked through the viewport at Bajorans, at the station he'd helped defend, at the civilization that still believed hope mattered more than the darkness. "This isn't my universe," he said finally. "Never will be. Too bright. Too optimistic. Too many people believing tomorrow's better than today." He smiled, and for once it reached his eyes. "But thanks for reminding me that sometimes believing that bullshit is what keeps you alive." He entered his ship. The wormhole opened, a celestial flower blooming light and possibility. Verteron particles surged with calculated precision. And Richard B. Riddick disappeared into the dimensional barrier, returning to a universe where survival was earned through violence, and hope was a luxury only fools afforded. But he carried something back with him. A memory of people who'd chosen to fight for strangers. A little girl who'd believed promises mattered. A captain who'd proven that ideals, however naive, could hold the line against darkness. And in the Trek universe he left behind, Deep Space Nine continued its vigil. A station on the frontier, defending the light against forces that claimed darkness was destiny. The prophets watched from their wormhole temple, satisfied that their instrument had served its purpose. Linear beings sometimes needed reminders that even in universes governed by different physics, one truth remained constant. Choice mattered. Sacrifice mattered. And sometimes, the monsters who remembered their humanity saved the worlds that had forgotten what monsters looked like. Live long and prosper. Hit the subscribe button for more interesting stories.